Beyond All Reason is a vital handhold in the world of RTS gaming, made all the more impressive by the fact that this game costs a grand total of 0 currency units. It's a freeware strategy game, roughly inspired by / copying a load of stuff from Total Annihilation, a game from the before times, although it much more closely resembles the more recent Supreme Commander, a game which itself was a spiritual successor of sorts to Total Annihilation. It's pretty much 95% Supreme Commander, and actually the stuff they bring from Total Annihilation is the weakest part of the game, I'll say, and constitutes some of the big problems Beyond All Reason has. So yes, I'm very anti-Total Annihilation, and I'll bring that into my commentary here and there. If you don't know what either of those games are, luckily that doesn't matter at all, because Beyond All Reason stands on its own 2 feet. Asterisk. This video will now be hours of ranting. To the contrary, you're watching Offie D's Game Grounds. It's a good game. Here's a massive rant trying to unearth both good and bad things, with a mind to thinking about what an improved version would look like. To frame all this, I'm going to provide a commentary on the quote-unquote campaign of Beyond All Reason. The big caveat out of the gate is that Beyond All Reason is primarily just the core mechanics of an RTS, with no particular game hanging off it, which means playing multiplayer battles or skirmishes is where it's at. However, it does come with a campaign. And for the sake of commentary, I'll treat this campaign as a vaguely cohesive gameplay experience, even though different parts were made by different people at different times, and really it was not supposed to be looked at with the critical lens I'll be bringing. So some of what I'm going to say is going to be pretty invalid, but what's new? I'll be taking the view of, if you showed this to the public, what problems would they face trying to play it? And yes, the game was not intended for a general audience, so we can basically just have fun pointing at everything here. I'll probably tone it down because of that. As mentioned, I also want to attack the Total Annihilation formula, which isn't really Bar's fault, but I think it needs updating, and I'll blame Bar for not doing that essentially. I'll get into the detail of my brainworms here as we go. With that prefaced, let's go check out the missions that some people kindly made for free, in a game that a load more people kindly made for free, in a genre that sorely needs this game. It needs it to succeed, moreover, which is why I'm here to complain about it. We'll probably wax lyrical about the game's place in the gaming scene later on. If you have no idea what this game is, then don't worry, I will lay out what we're doing as we go on in these missions, and I shall interrupt my commentary for various topic asides to go annoyingly in-depth on certain things here and there. Ready? Let's begin our journey off the precipice of reason with Scenario 1. There is an enemy base in this desert. We gotta take it out. One thing to mention is that there's no plot in the game, so don't worry about that. There are 2 factions. Sometimes the missions will be the faction fighting itself. Basically, the game would work with any number of factions, including 1, because their relations don't matter at all. The giant robots are fighting each other. Let's not worry too much about why that is. Should let me write those Transformers movies. Ignoring how we got here, we start making our own base. The process of getting started with that in any RTS is where the dirty words build order will come up. Here's what I'll say to start. If you're a relatively normal gamer, and you don't really know what I mean when I say build order, you will never enjoy Beyond All Reason. This is your granddad's strategy game. For all its innovations that make it a standout title, its foundation is very traditional, hardcore, and nerdy. Build order equals list of orders you give for the first few minutes that you follow religiously, because it allows you to get a good footing, kind of like putting chess pieces in the middle of a board, but probably more importantly, it gives you a usable early game economy without having to understand how to design such an economy yourself. That's a crucial topic that's really interesting about this RTS in particular. More on this later. For now, all I can say about my initial gameplay is that I was essentially following a walkthrough, and this time I recommend doing this. I'm a purist. Normally I would never recommend walkthroughs or cheating, at least at first. But this time's different. It's not cheating. You're not missing anything good by not experiencing this yourself, not learning it yourself. The game won't hold your hand, but it will assume you have been handheld. It's like getting in a car and just driving. The gameplay isn't that good, there's no difficulty curve, so don't be like, "Oh, filthy casuals, they want 10 hours of driving lessons before they drive, blah blah blah." Look, we're going to be discussing tutorialization very soon actually, so I'll just tell you the trick I'm using here in this mission to avoid needing it. Use build orders off the internet, and don't think too much. Do not try to engage with the game yourself. This is the only way to avoid essentially learning the game wrong and getting screwed over right off the bat. We'll get back to that again later. Words like game and play, they're some ways down the road, and you need to be able to drive already to get there. I can't hold myself back, so let's get to my first topic. As for the mission commentary, let's just say I somehow managed to build an army of robots. We'll go and look for enemies to kill, and really that'll be done once it's done. The enemy doesn't resist in the first mission, they're not playing. Because this is the de facto real tutorial, just a sort of sandbox with literal sand. We're really stretching the term tutorialization here, forcing me to begin my first topic for this game. Topic: how are you meant to know how to play this? Now, some experienced players out there might see I do appear to have worked out how to play the game a bit right away. But as I implied before, that's not really to the game's credit. This is a study game. The kind of game where you need to learn, practice, revise, read debates on certain things to be able to perform build orders and do the analyses the game expects you to do from the very beginning. The good news is that this is made explicit. The game tells you to learn it first, and the website you get the game from has loads of resources for this. A lot of the information on what the units and buildings are in the game and how you're meant to use them is unfortunately on this external website. A very old school UX, you might say, emulating having to look things up in a book to play a game like in the bad old days. And while I also have a bit of nostalgia for that, it does suck. It's one of the several big barriers to entry for Beyond All Reason, and I'll be establishing some more in this commentary, which become the main reason I can't fully get behind a game that is otherwise, aside from those problems, the future of all gaming. Like, this would be an 11 out of 10 game. It's just wrapped itself very tightly in the skin of a game that will inspire very mixed reactions. From, it actually is 11 out of 10, to, this is unplayable nonsense garbage, it's not even a game. And there not being a tutorial is a foundation block of why that might be. This is one of the many points I can make here where there is a rebuttal built in, which is, it's a free game. It doesn't have those standards, why are you holding it to them? But I'm making this point anyway, because the game dares to be good, if you really put the work in. And that's a real tease of a setup, I think. If you're not going to come up with content to teach the game, at least have the decency for the game to be bad, so I don't have to learn it. The game needs a tutorial more than most, and this game getting a tutorial would benefit the world of strategy gaming more than most. That's the key. Well, I read the guides, I watched the YouTube videos, I saw expert after expert contradict each other on build orders, controls, strategy recommendations. It's a mess. This, unfortunately, is a nerds-only strategy game. There will be more things to point out later that hammer this home, but maybe it doesn't need to be. That's what I'll argue throughout this video. The gameplay you're seeing me pull off here, as terrible as it is probably an above-average first-time player performance, and that's a problem. This is a real reverse Gascoigne of a mission, if you will, because it really shows you how the game isn't. It leaves you free to play in a style that will fail for the rest of the game. And I was only saved by having enough experience to know that this mission is not at all in the spirit of the game. So there's no use getting comfy amid the creativity, something we'll surely rant about later. Before that first mission, and now before the second one, I was practicing build orders in skirmish mode. I was trying things I saw in YouTube comments or YouTube videos themselves. All I'll say for now is that learning a build order for the first few minutes isn't nearly enough. More on this in a bit. This match here is the first time I was able to beat the lowest level AI. I think it was my 4th or 5th attempt. And the only reason it worked was because I was able to win as my build order came to a close. The longer the games go on, the less I will know what to do and will have problems with that. I really need to rely on book moves, but I haven't read enough of the book, and that's going to be an issue. I'm doing a bot build here, bots being one of the unit archetypes. being made from a bot factory, whereas other units are made from an air factory, a seaplane factory. There are like 6 types of units with their own building lines, and we'll dive into that mess later. For now, all I want to point out is that you get this post-match stats screen, which is nice. It's just broken. And again, we raise our hands and say, beggars can't be choosers. If someone can't be bothered to fix this for free, then you can't really complain, can you? Or can I? Let's just do mission 2. This mission is a simple one-on-one match against the AI. Only you start with a base, so it's easier for you. That said, after learning build orders, being given stuff right away kind of throws you off. Like, I have no handle on where we are in the build. I can't find this page in the book, and the game's already started. Well, building units and attacking might do something, and I wanted to mention something that won't be too obvious in all this footage. You might have seen back there I queued like 40 military units, then a few builders, yet the builders will come out of the factory first. It's hotkeys. Queue order depends on what keys you hold as you give orders, and this is true to basically everything in the game. Most orders have alternative modes if you press or hold keys while giving them. This is a very hotkey heavy game, even outside of the usual things, where you can hotkey all of the menus and economy stuff to quickly make buildings and units. In fact, the sheer variety of orders you can give is astounding. It's amazing. It's something we'll get to glazing later. But the less glazed point for now is I am only able to play the game as you see here with this level of skill because of doing work. I knew that if you press Z, C, then hold Shift and Alt while tapping Z and X and then dragging the mouse, it lets you make wind turbines. Yes, some of this hotkeying is pretty out of control in this game, pun intended. Combined with the usual ability to queue up orders and alter the queue order on the fly as you do it, it means you're going to be sitting there typing 150 words per minute to get your base design into the game. You don't have to, of course, but the advantage to using hotkeys is great, greater than in other games, I would say. Yes, pressing some god-defying combination of Z, X, C, Shift, Alt, Space and Control with your octopoid left hand is the real Gascoigne moment of Beyond All Reason. I got distracted ranting. My first attack on the enemy failed miserably. My second attack went amazing, because they moved their commander right into my line of advance, and I didn't even have to attack their base. In many stages, killing the biggest of the robots, the commander, allows you to win instantly, although that's not a hard and fast rule. We won that battle, which is basically a skirmish but easier, and I only broke a few of my fingers and had 3 meltdowns over the precise nature of what the numbers on the screen mean, which we'll get to. Mission 3 is a simple 3 versus 3 team game, and you can vaguely feel the essence of a tutorializing campaign structure here. As we had an AI that wasn't playing, we had a cheat start against a low-level AI. Now we've got 3 versus 3 low-level AIs, and the player's contribution will be diluted, such that it might not matter if those 2 games from before didn't really teach you much because you've got companions to carry you. And I would assume those stages didn't teach you much because, well, how could they? Maybe it scared you into studying at least, that might work. Let me preface the coming topics in this video with a nice comment. This game is beautiful in its complexity, but a large amount of that complexity is wasted on a human player, and I think while it's not a badly designed game, it's going to be hard to convince people of that if you just run the EXE in front of them and say have fun. That's a gold standard test for games as an entertainment medium, as something that is usually supposed to be some kind of quote-unquote fun. You should be aiming for this to work, where you just give them the product and they will have fun with it. Even better, if they can have a kind of fun nothing else can offer, which Beyond All Reason actually does, I preach, grasping for evidence that somebody who didn't spend 5 years studying for the bar exam will appreciate. To get the rants therein off my chest, I should first lay out the very basics, while my commander here pulls some giant build order I'm queuing up. Topic: the most complicated economy in all of gaming. Now that's a grandiose title, and really it only applies to the economics of this game if you want to really maximize your efficiency, which no one, even at the top level, even nearly does. mainly because it's so difficult to actually get the best out of your economy in this game. So yes, I'm going to freak out about this economy, but know that this is mainly from the perspective of someone who doesn't like knowing there are problems I am quote-unquote supposed to be dealing with. It's perfectionism. However, in my defense, the game is difficult enough that you do actually need to get an abnormally good grasp of this abnormally and deceptively complicated economy to complete the campaign. It's an economy where you need to make gameplay inputs non-stop to get the most out of it. It's not passive at all, that's the big deception. It could take up more than 100% of your attention. It's way more game than the game needs. That's my big thesis, with the sub-thesis being that having the skill ceiling be somewhere at the other end of the universe is a little demoralizing. It seemed so different at first. Only 2 resources, metal and energy. Bah! Age of Empires 2 has 4 resources. This must be a baby economy, I declare. Well, the thing is, what we've got here is the same deal from TA and SC, that being an economy that exists purely in the present tense, a flow-based economy. It's more about matching inputs and outputs and directing resources where they need to go, with one catch. There is no UI for this. You're on your own, partner, and that principally is why people don't do good economics in Beyond All Reason. So let me try to give you an example. The main principle of this present tense economy is that your outgoings should match your income. Too little income means stuff doesn't happen. Too much income means the income disappears and you miss out. Whichever player misses out the least, that is, whoever can work out how to actually spend their income in real time reliably, they get more number in the wargame that's theoretically happening out there somewhere outside of your base. So let's say you're making 20 metal and 500 energy per time unit. I'll assume seconds here. You've got a commander, a factory, and 1 builder. You need to order those 3 sources of drawdown of quote-unquote build, as the game names this invisible number, to make things that cost 20 metal and 500 energy per second, not in total. The commander makes a turret costing 5 metal and 100 energy per second. The factory makes a tank costing 10 metal, 300 energy per second. And the builder makes... Oh, wait a second. Were you looking in the menu for something that would cost the remaining 5 metal and 100 energy per second? No. Sorry. The game doesn't operate at the UI level with a cost per second basis. You don't know the cost per seconds of anything, so I shouldn't have given you those numbers before in the example. All of this is invisible. You only know the total cost, which is significantly less useful in this game. And this simple UI choice immediately catapults economic management into a higher universe of black magic. What you do with the builder in that scenario is a rich trial and error based decision, and it's one you have approximately 1 frame, or to be more generous, 1 second to make. Throw in the fact that instead of building something, you could have the builder assist one of the other builds, which changes its drawdown rate, its cost per second, by an unknown amount. There was one hint in the game that I thought was going to be able to allow you to calculate these things so they weren't unknown amounts, but it turned out they weren't, and I'll have to rant about what that was later on. Now, consider that you actually have way more than 3 build sources in reality. You might have, say, 40, and you can have them assist each other's builds in any combination with no limit on how many things can work on one build. And it's all just gone, it's over. The economy gameplay is just traveling away from us faster than the speed of light. You're simply not going to be able to manage this in a strategic way. You can't have that headspace and play a game here. And it might all just stem from not having the information reported to you. It might just be a boring UI issue. All you have at the moment is your UI element at the top, telling you if things are broken or not. So you give an order, and then when things break, you know they've broken, and you can go and ungive it, or just sit there, letting it be broken and hoping it fixes itself, which is my style because it's easier. It's a source of depth. Yet it's also a reason, and perhaps the reason, the skill floor is so high that you can't see it from the ground level. Like, the skill floor is in a cloud. It's in heaven. Can you reach heaven? Your income is 48 metal and 792 energy per second. Can you afford to make an Overwatch turret with 3 builders? That's it. That's all the information you get. Tell me the answer and you're out of time. Like, it's already too late to answer now. Only God knows the real answer. So it's off to heaven we go. In total annihilation, where this present tense economy with a future tense costing system comes from, it was all less of a problem because you built less, and the economy was more stop and starty and less of a flow, and the UI UX wasn't good enough to do economy stuff half the time anyway. I think you couldn't even queue orders in the original design of this economy. It's that far in the past. You probably could get a good flow going if you were good at the game, but if the game needs you to have a flow, like if it's about having a flow, then it needs to be doable to some extent without being good at the game so that people can start playing the game at any point. That might mean in practice, the grand change of course, telling the player the cost per second of things, first and foremost. And I'm going to not mention here the fact that energy generation, especially in the early game, is partially randomized. Galaxies are colliding. We're not even going there. We're not even going there. You could make religions out of this, and people have. They're called build orders. Chant with me, brothers. Extractor, extractor, turbine, turbine, factory, turbine, extractor, builder, turbine, turbine, turret builder. And it becomes a chorus because there's a build order for each builder you add. And then there are construction turrets which speed things up, and just all hope of balancing the economy becomes quite limited. The thing is, what the developers might say in response to this is you're not supposed to be doing this stuff that I'm imagining I want to do but can't do. And that's the answer to all of this. This economy, while being hyper-complex to run optimally in theory, were you to just stare at it and ignore the rest of the game, it's a vibes fest because you're supposed to be doing something else. It's just there for you to get as much income as you can, and as much production as you can, as much drawdown potential, as much build as you can, in between going out there onto the map and playing the game. That's the answer. Don't care. Listen to the build order chant at first, join the chorus, and only really panic if the numbers are at 0. Well, let's just go shoot at some robots and not worry about how we're paying for all of this. The battle went well because I was able to use my rush build order to get the enemy opposite me out of contention, which killed one enemy commander. My allies killed a commander on the front line somehow, and then I pushed into the back line and found the last commander standing outside of their defences, so we can pile on that and seek the win. All very nice. It's fun when it works. It's a mind virus wanting to do it right, and the game is bad for that. I mentioned paranoia being a problem for this game, but this is what I mean really, wanting to feel that things are at least going normally, like you're on track for what the game expects you to be doing. But it's so hard to avoid constant warning messages and problems in the economy. You know all your difficulties on the war side of things are something to do with those ever-present warnings, and you kind of wish you could do something about it, but maybe there's no time. Here's mission 4. This one is the quote-unquote tutorial for defensive maps, closed maps, where making static defenses will be disproportionately useful. You could indeed wall off the middle and claim your side easily enough. However, I wasn't playing like that because I thought, no, I want to be pro, I'll play this as an open map and try to defend via pressure and raiding and RTS stuff. And in my hubris, I missed out on the fact that in Beyond All Reason, defending is really powerful, and attacking or raiding specifically is less powerful than in other RTSs. The reason defending is powerful I will save for later because it's something stupid, it's not necessarily to do with the balancing. But the reason raiding is a problem is because of a word very familiar to those in the SupCom scene, reclaim. When you lose a unit on the enemy side of the map, approximately half its value goes into the enemy economy, or you must assume this is going to happen. That makes the value proposition of attacking very steep, because if you don't do enough damage, you actually make the enemy stronger even if you killed things by attacking them. Which I really like conceptually. That kind of flips around and makes defending quite nice because you can farm the enemy for resources to some extent, and we'll see how to do that very efficiently way later. On the flip side, in this game most buildings have virtually no health, so the weakest units in the game can actually pull off devastating raids if you don't lose them. So There's basically a skill flaw where bad raids effectively benefit the enemy, but good raids can actually get a lot of work done out there and zone the enemy off parts of the map. And even if this raid is done by 3 of the cheapest units in the game that take 2 seconds to build. Unfortunately, I'm not going to have the micro to really pull this off, while thinking that I do, and that's a very dangerous combination in this particular game because of Reclaim. And also holding me back is one big factor I want to praise. The AI in this game is actually good. In fact, it's so good that it's bad. What does that mean? Well, you might be able to see here, and throughout the whole video really, that the AI is amazing at single unit micro, which makes it amazing at skirmishing and raiding. It will juke around all over the place, no matter what else it's doing, to make sure that one random tiny bot gets into your blind spot, gets past your army, forces you to split your army or build base defenses everywhere. It works you relentlessly. Even while I'm in their base killing their dudes, they're trying to sneak random 1 or 2 unit raids across the middle to attack my base. On genuinely open maps, this would be devastatingly effective. Because as I mentioned, 1 or 2 units can obliterate you. And if you sent your whole army to the front lines, which I do because I'm a basic bitch, then I can't respond to this effectively. Things go well because we zone the enemy off most of their side of the map. But I'm microing so hard, and you can see there are problems in the economy bar at the top. We've got no metal at all, overflowing energy just disappearing. Feels okay at first, but actually it's worse than not even generating it, because the generators you're using to do this cost you resources, you're still down on the deal. This is how you don't play the game. As an introductory stage, it's probably giving me the wrong idea on several things. Before I rant about that topic, allow me to introduce Stage 5, which is the Navy tutorial. Insofar as there is sea, and the game tells you naval units exist, and then leaves you to do with that what you will. While I do something stupid with it, let's try to whitewash that stupidity with... Topic: Easy victory teaches you the wrong things. I touched on this earlier, the idea of the reverse Gascoigne treatment, where the game isn't attempting to gatekeep content of the game behind the skills the developers do expect you to develop, leading to a failing upwards effect. The Peter principle, this is actually called, exemplified well I think by this and the previous mission. So back there in the de facto defend your base tutorial, I learned nothing of the sort because I just rushed with my build order. Copied from XXX she beyond my all till I reason XXX's YouTube comments, and it worked fine. But did you see my economy during that rush? It was totally broken, and I wasn't being punished in the way I needed to be to learn early lessons that are essential later. That is what I'm calling the Gascoigne approach. Doesn't matter why I'm calling it that if you don't know. My raid strategy only worked because the rush was effective enough to cripple the enemy, such that victory abroad with bad gameplay at home still worked. Hashtag British Empire. I come away from the defend the base mission with 2 lessons in my head. Number 1, don't defend your base, it's probably fine, which was only the case because the closed map meant I couldn't be raided effectively. And number 2, don't worry about the economy after the first few minutes, you can just rush to win all the time, which is only the case because we're facing low-level AI, which gets its units out slower than me. For me as a player, all I've seen is that whatever I'm doing, it makes me win confidently. But as a more grizzled player, I now look back and see the foundations being laid of later frustration. That's why I'm ranting about all of this. The lessons I'm learning won't apply later, and they'll make the game worse as a result. In fact, the lessons I'm learning are so wrong, it makes learning non-beginner techniques really hard, so this sort of compounds as well. This will manifest here in the naval tutorial mission, because the game will be slower naturally due to the nature of this map, meaning I have to play way beyond my build order, meaning ideally I need to actually understand how to play the game, and I straight up don't. If I hadn't already played a load of Supreme Commander, and generally already had an idea of what to do, this would be a horrible wake-up call, and make the game just seem impossible and messily made, you might even say. Again, this game is probably aimed at people like me with exactly that experience, invalidating my comments, but I'm going to work on this assumption that if we wanted to give this game to a normal person and convince them it's good, this is what we should be thinking about. I didn't play the Naval tutorial mission in Beyond All Reason with perfect, omniscient skill on the very first attempt, and I'm claiming this is a sign of a problem with the game's onboarding. And even though I'm being facetious as usual, this does actually lead to problems. There is room for improvement. Not just room, whole lots of prime real estate for improvement, all along the road to making this into a real game, TM. The problem I'll have in this stage is that my rushes have failed. So now what? I've been able to claim most of the map, but that doesn't help me because I don't know what to do with it. And the economy isn't looking so good, once again. Beyond All Reason is a game where map control matters less than in usual RTSs, because if you have enough space in your base, you can do anything. You can make resources back there and outcompete someone with full map control. If you do the economy stuff I was ranting about, better. We shall be seeing that later on. For now, the AI is doing it against me. It's strong enough to resist my ships and hovercraft, while still raiding me with amphibious or submerged units sneaking by me 24/7. I don't know not only how to balance the economy, but I don't know how to go to T2, as they say, which basically means how to unlock stronger units, how to tech up. I was aware this was a thing in the game, but I hadn't done it. I hadn't needed to do it, and I genuinely didn't think I needed it. So I started focusing not on winning, but simply calming the situation. An instinct I think comes very naturally. I see lots of people who aren't strategy game pros resorting to this. They just want stability in the match. So they do things like me here, covering the entire map in ships and submarines, so that nothing can get past me, effectively wasting huge amounts of resources on units that will do nothing 99% of the time, whereas the enemy can make 100 times more effective investments in single turrets or 2 or 3 raiders, and keep me feeling pressured even though I control 90% of the map. Now this does work, I guess, as a gameplay technique. It is fun to do. It's satisfying to lock yourself behind your army and get a moment to think. It is perhaps essential to get that time to think and even look at your options and learn that T2 exists. But this is what failing upwards looks like. This is the Peter principle. I should know all of this a long time ago, definitely before this moment. This is the game's fault if we hold the game responsible for its tutorialization, which the game itself doesn't. Like, it doesn't hold itself responsible for this. It doesn't want to be responsible for this. It shrugs at me when I claim it didn't teach me a build order that includes going to T2, or tell me that T2 exists or what it even was. Don't shrug at me, game, that's what I'm going to say. Extend a hand to a poor street child wishing he knew how to play the cool robot game. The normies, they really do wish they could play the cool robot game, and unfortunately, as much as you protest, it is up to you to make that happen. The bootstrapping approach is a Faustian bargain, and other things I scream naked outside the house of the random enthusiast who made this game. I did eventually discover how to make good units, as you can see, and how that works in detail needs a deep dive. I'll show you the first key discovery there in a second. Eventually I had the best navy in the game, and I discovered I could use attack ground to fire into the fog of war to take out the enemy base, probably. This goes on for a while, but peep the game time in the lower right. I was there for more than an hour, mostly with nothing happening. I was just trying to work out how the game works beyond the first 10 minutes of rush, and I think it worked. I think I learned a few things, but it was not nearly enough to use it in practice, to use outside of the kiddie pool here. And I felt like an absolute moron the whole time. It wasn't that fun. Now, surely driven by embarrassment and feelings of inadequacy, the sorts of things you love to see from an entertainment product, I tried the same mission again. This mission has a nice upside when it comes to being a hands-off tutorial. Because the map is so closed, as they say, it's so easy to defend that you can buy yourself time to look at what's happening on the ground and look at tooltips and stats and start to understand things. I'll probably break down later over how bad I think the tooltips and general communication of stats in the game is overall. But let me first hit you with something I think is the biggest number confusion in the game, and is probably, of all the things I'm going to say today, the most objective biggest problem with this game. Topic: what does the game mean when it uses the word build? You might have seen colourful particles going from one thing to another in this game. That's stuff getting built. The particles themselves, they are the build. What do I mean, the build? I don't know. Somewhere in the half-broken tooltips it tells you things like the bot builders I'm using have a build of 100. This number represents the throughput of resources they can handle, as per my earlier rants, where you need to have enough builders building at any one time to be drawing down the amount of resources your economy currently produces. This makes build basically work like a resource. You can imagine a third number at the top, where it says how much build you aren't spending. So if you have lots of build, but your resources are balanced, that means your economy is too small / you spent too much making builders, and now you can't use their build. Now you probably think, so a unit with 100 build can move 100 resources per unknown time unit, right? So if my two surplus numbers on metal and power at the top add up to roughly 100, that's when you know to make one additional builder to maintain optimal growth. That's easy, we don't even need the other numbers, do we? No. No, you fool! What is this mental faculty you are employing? Reason? Reason? Do you even know where we are? How far beyond all reason we are. It's got its own units, and I think everything you can build has a sort of natural invisible drawdown per second rate attached to it, and then it's multiplied in some way by the amount of capital B build being beamed in. Question mark, question mark, question mark. I guess one problem is that none of this is mentioned anywhere, shown anywhere. You can't tell that this is true. I assure you guys, you've got to believe me. You've got to dig to discover the madness on this one. And problem two is that it's so important to understand this, to do anything in the game. The AI does pay attention to build. You can't ignore it or anything. It's not some pro-only secret. The long story short is that having a good economy is quite a lot about having the right number of builders spending the right amount of build on the right things, and the details of that are endless, so we'll just stop here. To be constructive here, what do I actually want to happen to demystify this? I want the numerical relationship between build and resource throughput / requirements in factories to be simplified, e.g. builders having 20 build means 20 resources per second. I want a UI element saying how much build you need to spend all your resources / how much build is being wasted right now. And I would love UI elements listing all the things build is being used on right now, with the ability to prioritize and pause things nice and easy all at once in like one handy menu. Basically all this stuff is possible in the game. It's how it works already, you just need a UI for it. We're 95% done. Just write the numbers from the RAM onto the screen, please. I can almost sympathize with not doing it because that's the boring part of game development, making UI elements and dynamic tables, playing with data structures in the background. All I'll say is, right now this is a barrier to entry to this game. It's a big one. Half the people giving tips on this game and trying to explain how to play it just have to go through like, okay, here's what build is and here's what it's supposed to be. Like, explaining something that is so basic, the game has to tell you about it. It can't be left to Reddit to explain. This game literally loses a few points out of 10 by not addressing this issue. It's such low-hanging fruit. I might come back to this vague topic later, so let's just move on. Fix it, and if you still don't know what I'm talking about when I use the word it, exactly, that is also the problem. With a little more insight on how to build things, and the true mechanics defining what makes a good build order, we come to the next stage where the complexity level of the game is going to phase shift one universe higher. We need more degrees of freedom, and for that we are introduced to one of the game's coolest features, unlimited resurrection. You begin this mission surrounded by a destroyed base, and you're provided with resurrection units. These are a special kind of builder unit that revives defeated units and buildings, with the caveat that the wreckage must be sufficiently intact to do this. So we've got no build order here, The resurrection bots will get to work making whatever random base the wreckage will give me, while I try to use my freed up headspace to make an immediate attack with a few units that got revived on the way. It doesn't go well enough, but you can see the potential power of raiding. Bases tend to be open, and major economy structures tend to die in a couple of hits, so a simple pass with a few units can do a lot. I think my mistake here was standing still once the enemy pounced on me. A simple run by is enough. Well, how am I sure of that? Let's cut to a bit later. I've got an army securing the centre and beginning to advance, but suddenly my base is blowing up, because a couple of critters made it to the edge of the map where I have no line of sight, and instantly started blasting everything. I've got nothing to stop them, but before I can make a desperate turret, the enemies try to escape out of the defended side of the base and die. Still, that was a couple of rovers, ultra cheap, bottom tier units. And they've not only hit my economy, they've forced me to spend time trying to sort things out back there, right when I was about to make a push. The AI is really good at this kind of high value, tiny attack. A little later, I've got radars set up that allow me to see roughly what the AI is doing, and we can tell they are considering coming from the east. In response, I sent my whole army that way to try and sweep that corner and take it. But the AI splits into 3 groups and retreats away, some of them getting behind me and towards my base. It's just so good. The AI really can play this game. I end up getting my massive army kited by a smaller one down the east end of the map, claiming territory but not to any benefit for me, while their army comes to attack the centre, and I freak out and start trying to get back there, although my defences should be enough here. One thing to mention about defences and units in general is that I didn't have a good handle on what they can handle. So I didn't know what to expect a turret to reasonably stop. I didn't know what units are good against what and such, for the simple reason that even with all of that pre-game study, there isn't really any moment in the games themselves to think about such things. I'm just categorizing things as stuff I can attack with, and that's about it. It's actually not a bad mental shortcut, because buildings are so weak that if you can attack with anything, you can make real progress. You might have noticed the enemy are in my base, and I haven't noticed. I'm staring at my formations thinking, is there a way to stabilize this and win some time to look over everything? But there's no way I'm gonna have the vigilance to stop a handful of units from just fading into the fog of war in the west and then reappearing from the top corner in my base. You've really got to lock down the whole map in this game, every pixel. The AI will find that one pixel your turrets don't cover and make an attack through that angle. It's impressive, and unlike any AI I've faced. That's good and bad, as it's cool that it can do this, but just not here, not to me, please. I'm under so much pressure trying to read tooltips at lightning speed while fighting 4 attacks at the same time. I don't need the AI to be good. Its difficulty curves then, that's my issue. Even with all my work, I wasn't good enough at the game by now to actually handle this mission. I'm relying on instinct, panic, luck, and the AI not pushing their advantage as hard as they actually could here to stay afloat. And as my base disappears once again, I am defeated. It's time to rage quit. My new plan was to forget raiding, forget contesting the map. I wanted to see if I could at least secure some kind of base and sit in it and see what happens from there. There are 2 reasons this attempt is going better. Number 1, I was willing to split up my forces at last and not only have 1 blob of units. And number 2, the AI, for all its skill, can be demoralized. That's how I like to think of it. The AI will absolutely stop pressuring you if it doesn't smell weakness. It's quite remarkable, this. If you make a show of really quickly responding to AI moves, it won't try them again. But if you let them in and they make some progress, they'll do the same thing but stronger in a couple of minutes. They probe. They seem to actually react to what they learn from the probing, more like a human player. It's really good. What this means in practice is that a slow and steady approach like this works abnormally well, against the strategy game meta. Because while you give up map control, the AI will attack you way less if you're not contesting map control. And because the AI is better at microing combat than you, brackets me, Just avoiding combat is more of an advantage than I can get from claiming more resources through map control. It's just working, both in a strategic sense and in a gameplay sense. It's just letting me play the game. Like, that's the best way of putting it. No combat means you can think about doing stuff and setting the foundations for gameplay later, and from a tutorialization new player point of view, just understanding things at all. Of course, that's still a major issue for me right here. We suddenly find the part of the strategy game experience I do like, where you're like planning and building and getting better, and you can actually perform stuff. This vaguely brings me to a broad point I want to make about the game. Topic: Revival and Degrees of Freedom. Beyond All Reason has a lot of what I'll call degrees of freedom, which is my pretentious way of saying that you have a lot of options for what to do. There are many knobs and dials on the what is the optimal move calculator, and this goes a long way to making that skill floor be high and skill ceiling be effectively infinite. There are two big degrees of freedom Beyond All Reason offers that other RTSs don't, which are Reclaim and Revival, and both mechanics are extremely powerful. Ignoring Reclaim for now, Revival is a mechanic that seems carefully designed to be really hard to use, yet it's so powerful that I would wager it's the most important skill to develop in this game. Extremely cheap resurrection bots can restore dead units to life for half their original cost, and they can repair damaged units for free. Free, yes, you can theoretically get infinite value out of units if you have these bots nearby, and you micro them efficiently. And halving the cost for reviving isn't just cheap, because it's also way more useful to revive a thing in a useful place rather than building it in your base, such as the front line. So the lead time between spending and getting something to happen is way lower with reviving too. So repair and revival is a much better strategy than actually making units. However, there's a catch. You have to actually do it. You have to give lots and lots of orders to lots and lots of things to make this happen. And that's why you will notably not see me doing much of this, because adding degrees of freedom to an RTS is like adding oars to a surfboard. This is the perfect analogy, I assure you, because using the oars will indeed make you go faster and be able to do more in general. However, surfing itself is already so difficult, you don't really have time to work the oars. I've argued many times in RTS commentaries that removing mechanics can increase a game's complexity, because it lets you go deeper with them. This is the opposite approach. Adding Revival as a new degree of freedom to the RTS formula pretty much requires you engage less with standard degrees of freedom to make room for it. You'll probably have to build less stuff and give fewer military orders if you want to handle the revival mechanics as well. And I was, as you might guess, way too overwhelmed to get in on this, at least, playing at first. This is my first impressions commentary, essentially. So here in the revival tutorial, it's all just wasted on me. However, I don't want to sit here claiming it should be cut out, as I was sort of implying just now, because it is such a cool idea. There is a strategic flow arising from the ability to revive things that I think is actually amazing. And it feels like it's the next step in the world of futuristic RTS games. And it just needs to be implemented in a different way. A way I've seen in other games, actually, but used to do something different. I'll save this mysterious point I want to make for later. We'll come back to revival as a concept. All I will say for now is that I didn't make very much use of it, because it's too much to do. The game does actually have various tools to make it easier. And again, I will rant vaguely about that in another topic, because it's secretly one of the best things about the game, and it's totally hidden, because you're not really supposed to like Beyond All Reason. If you overcome, though, the way the developers disguise the game as a bad game, you will find that it's got so much of this unheard of, unprecedented good in it. Well, I'll have to get to that to prove what I'm talking about. This is why I wanted to talk about this game in the first place. Gonna have to hold on. A parting shot I will make about Revival, though, is that the AI can do it. I was gobsmacked by the way I saw the AI using the Revival mechanics over the course of this campaign, so we'll look out for that. you have to give it to the bar AI once again. It has a decent idea of how to play this game, which is what makes the game so impressive and so oppressive. The AI is so good that humans just sort of trying to onboard into the game will struggle to get started. Something, the future of the economy, well, we don't need any more of this. Sitting back in inexplicable safety, I made an army that was able to suddenly push out and clear the map, including the enemy base, but that's not enough. Sometimes the game wants you to kill all of the enemy's builders to win, and if you think the enemy won't be putting their builders in the corners, in radar blind spots, hiding them in the fog of war, you're in for a bad time. It actively tries to survive against this objective, and it's so annoying, I guess, because you do this cool move where you like slip around the enemy and destroy their base, but it doesn't do anything. You don't win for doing that. You have to destroy everything, so you can't slip around them. You need to slip back to where they were originally and fight them some more. During which time they'll probably go and rebuild their base, and this endless dance just begins. It's a skill issue for me, obviously, but after taking out their base, I ended up spending 16 new Imperial British minutes trying to find all the builders on the map. Just chasing the radar contacts, always thinking, oh, that'll be it. It's just a few seconds until the end of the stage, so I won't bother making scouts to look like comprehensively and send units everywhere to look for them, because this next one I'm about to kill, that'll be the end. And of course it never was. Like, I'm there, half standing out of my chair, ready to leave the computer because I've decided the job is done. I need some slack here. Just let all of my units go under AI control and search for the enemy that way. Like, have a button saying, like, okay, and just finish it. Like, I'm done. We've done the important part. Can I go now? Obviously, there's a big ask, an ask I make of basically every game as well. But here's a game where it feels somewhat plausible to ask for that. Although it does open, of course, the incredibly slippery slope to what if the AI played the entire game for me? And a less hyperbolic version of that idea is on the docket to be ranted about later, of course. Now, the next mission is an easier one. We've had the de facto Navy tutorial, time for the de facto Air tutorial. You're placed on a bunch of mesas and you have to fight 2 AI opponents. But now the degrees of freedom are totally extinguished. You don't need to consider whether going bot or vehicles will be helpful, you can only go air. And while I don't know the build order for that, it's simple enough, there can't be many things it could be. So I'll end up basically stumbling around, losing all of the map, but actually pulling off a decent air attack build in the end. And while I do that, I want to explain what I mean when I say like go bot, go vehicle, go air, and tell you what ground my gears about the game's building trees. Topic: there are too many different building trees. That's the thesis, really. It won't be massively obvious throughout the footage of this campaign, but the build menus you have available take some learning and some digging to understand. You have access to a vast amount of buildings and units in the game, and it's safe to say that I didn't use most of them. So yes, this is a very not pictured here type point, but I suppose that is the point. It starts off simple. Your commander can make certain buildings divided into categories, so you've got 4 build menus in your bottom left UI panel to begin with. Some might already say that's too much, and I can see this being too much for like a player in the first minute or something, and you would ideally want to introduce the menus separately, blah blah blah, like with a proper hand-holding tutorial. But there's no point thinking about the presentation of the first 4 pages of the building options, because there are like 50 pages in reality. To begin discovering this, you make a unit factory of either the bot, vehicle, ship, hovercraft, or aircraft variety. I think there might be another one. Each one comes with its own page of build options. And they also make builder units. The type of builder you get from each of those 5 or 6 options comes with its own unique set of 4 new pages of building options. So we're up to about 20 pages so far, but many are shared. Like, many kinds of builder can all make a wind turbine. Some of them can make artillery, 1 or 2 can make torpedo turrets, maybe one of them can make a sonar. Crucially, they usually can't, quote-unquote, go for T2, for the category they didn't originate from. E.g., a bot factory builder can't make a T2 ship factory, but it can make a T2 bot factory. This means there's great value in picking a type of unit and sticking with it, because it's expensive and slow to change over. That's why we say go air, because if you start off with an air factory, realistically your next factory will be air T2, and if it isn't, whoever did get their natural T2 up first will probably beat you because going to T2 quickly really helps. So I want to argue there's too much subdivision here, both from a UI perspective and an overall design perspective. We'll talk about design first. It's not unusual for RTSs to make you go down lanes like this. And it's even beginner-friendly, the thing I apparently am advocating for, because doing this limits the degrees of freedom that I'm so scared of. The number of possible strategies in Beyond All Reason is reduced because it's weak to do a certain build and then change to another one, so you're not versatile in that way. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn around and argue for more degrees of freedom, the nightmare, because I don't like the way the build trees diverge. I remember often feeling disappointed you couldn't switch unit types without taking some kind of hit, and it having a long lead time. So let me bring you to my vague idea. It's nothing special. It's a simplification that could be one of these simplifications that makes the game more complex, my favorite RTS thing to suggest. You simply would have a stuff factory, and Navy air vehicle modes would just be pages in its build menu. Or perhaps not even pages if you're feeling really UIE, as in it could have a full screen build menu, that's what I mean. I want to be given the full palette of the game, in a way that I felt I was missing. And I want to even just see the full palette of the game. That's another big point I often like to make. I don't even know what you can make in this game because I couldn't see the menus. The issue this will give you is that if you give players the freedom to pivot around with the full breadth of your faction's roster, it's going to very quickly lead to stalematey situations where you can never really get that window of advantage for building a good unit before the enemy's lead times to countering it can go through. The thing is, my perspective is that I don't care at all about PvP balancing, which is the point of this game, so that's why I'm quite flippant about these things. It allows me to ignore many problems that probably should not be ignored. One thing I can be more sure about is that at the very least, I think this is the point I will die on. The builder units should not be divided even if everything else is. This is something Supreme Commander got right, I think. That game is very similar to this, but builders are universal. There's no C builder and bot builder and so on. You just have 3 engineers for the 3 tech levels, and they can make everything in the game. So when you think, I want to do this, there's one channel you go through and it's nice and easy to understand and implement, and you get to just do the stuff easier. There's less stuff in your way. To me, that's a natural simplification that opens up strategies like Universal Factories would, but less so. You don't have to remember which builder makes which thing when learning the game, because they all make everything. And there's so much to do in the game that having builders be limited to certain slices of the pool based on where they came from isn't depth. It's not complexity, it's complication. Complexity's evil sibling. It introduces not only barriers to entry for the game in terms of learning, but barriers to playing the game even at the highest level. And while those barriers might well be a necessary elimination of a degree of freedom, a source of difficulty that allows greater player expression of skill, some other highfalutin rationale goes here for doing this, it's just less fun, to me, as a novice playing PvE. Which reminds me of my side gripe here, which is that in Beyond All Reason, T2 builder units can't make T1 things, so it's sort of as divided as it could possibly be. You might think a T2 air unit could also have a page to make T1 air builder stuff, but it can't. You have to have all of the kinds of builders, including the upgraded and downgraded versions, available at the same time to have your full palette and have them on different control groups ready to select. It doesn't need to be like that, even if it's really cool or something in someone's mind to control your economy through all of these different avenues separately. Can anyone give me the other side of this? That's what I want to hear. Why would it be good to have builders be categorized and stay in their lane, as it were? I feel like it's only like this because Total Annihilation was like this, and Total Annihilation was only like this because it was an early RTS, and some ideas were brand new and untested. That's a concern I have about Beyond All Reason as a whole, as these building categories, they're probably the main offender here. I really think Supreme Commander went in the right direction by refactoring that, as we losers like to say. However, there is another aspect they brought in from Total Annihilation that I really don't like, to the extent it makes me even not want to play this game at all. And I think this feature I'm referring to probably puts off a load of people silently in the background. I'm going to talk about that secret weakness of the game in a future topic. We won via the good old-fashioned method of gunship rushing, and basically the reason that doesn't work for all missions is because if you tried it, the AI would rush you faster over land, and I would be dead by now. But yes, the AI isn't very good at going air, something I noticed across the board in the campaign, meaning an air-only mission really cuts the player a break. Unlike the next mission, Mission 8, a moderate nightmare that is perhaps the most gamey of the missions. So let me go into fine detail on this one in order to highlight that secretly, Beyond All Reason does have the potential to be a really tactical, micro-heavy, close-to-the-ground RTS, only usually you're way too busy for that nonsense. But that is why the classic no-base mission was invented, and indeed any good RTS campaign throws in a few of these. This mission is pretty difficult because the enemy does have a base, and they are playing the game against you, so you need to move fast. The only advantage you have is that some of your stuff is T2, and the enemy are restricted permanently to T1. You're also given several ghosts, a special unit that can go invisible, and can only attack with a suicide bomb EMP. Among the handful of units you have is the Fat Boy, far inferior to its Supreme Commander counterpart, but still useful for long-range bombardment. You can gradually deplete the enemy's towers and advance safely, while your Gunslinger, a general-purpose bot, kills the regular enemies. This would be a fun way to play if perhaps the enemy weren't actively building up a gigantic army on the other side of the map. I was being too simple in my approach, because it's fun to watch the enemy defenses give way and for new advances to become possible. Unfortunately, a less brain-dead approach is needed, and dare I say, a less fun approach is needed. Let's try and bend to the game's conceit and send in a ghost to disable some defenses, allowing us to move forward with all haste. It works, although we are limited by the slow speed of our Fat Boy. You possess 2 resurrection bots, and thus can, in principle, resurrect enemy base buildings and constructors to simply turn this into a regular bar 1 versus 1 scenario. I really liked this idea, and soon the chance to steal a constructor finally arose, so I jumped on it. I had to be careful because area of effect attacks don't leave revivable corpses. I'm not sure exactly what the rule is, but for our purposes, the Fat Boy leaves units too dead to revive. So I only just avoid killing the constructor with the Fat Boy, then the lightning attack from our welder assault bot gets the kill, meaning we're in business. My plan was to establish a little base in this choke point, using reclaimed metal to add towers and a few bots, especially new constructors that I could then send back west where the metal spots are unclaimed. This could be it, we could be there. This only fails because I was out of position getting more reclaim opportunities in the south when a rush of T1 units comes in and blows everything up. That's a load of metal down the drain, and this leads to everything dying soon enough. It's such a shame. Both the ideas I tried so far, the tower standoff advance and the stealing enemy things plan, they're pretty fun, only they weren't quite viable, or I wasn't quite good enough at them to really get it to go anywhere. There are even more meta-level subtleties to the design of this mission that now led me to try another approach that perhaps mixes here the things I liked about my 2 failed attempts. Can 2 failures make a success? Thing 1 is we're going to go back and do a gradual standoff against the towers. However, first, I'm going to investigate the suspiciously optional-looking southwest of the map. The scenario is effectively a race against time, so why would they bother placing enemies down here, not blocking the fastest route? I asked. A game design loser shall imagine the answer to be, oh, there's some secret thing down here, like an enemy factory you could resurrect to take an alternative path, or a key extra unit, something like that. Short version of this is, they didn't do that, it's just more random things to shoot, this is the wrong thing to do. But that's slightly better than it sounds actually, because of an extra subtlety to consider in this mission, the Gunslinger bot. By fighting more things, it levels up. Did you know that all units in this game have experience points and levels and their stats can change? Well, do you even know what their stats are? So yes, this mechanic is very deep. You'll probably never notice it if you're playing the game normally. But here, we deal with the subtlety that the Gunslinger, when it levels up, its range increases. What actually increases on a unit with level changes unit to unit as it turns out, let alone not knowing about the mechanic. What it even does specifically depends on the unit. This is just too deep, and we're now in this depth. It is possible to level up the gunslinger to the point when it can outrange enemy towers, making the standoff strategy more viable. Not to mention blasting through all of the hordes of T1 stuff with ease. It also has regenerating health, making it a key unit. So yes, the mission is starting to do what it needed to do here. It's forcing me to learn about a unit and appreciate what it can do in the right situation, and indeed learn about the level up system. An unusual thing, really, for a game that's more about just massing blobs of something and throwing them in. It's quaint to have this case study in the use of a single unit, like a single instance of a single unit. It's how a non-Total Annihilation RTS campaign would have done this. I'm microing, I'm looking at the numbers, I'm getting into this. Theoretically, I now need to say, do this for all units, all buildings, all techniques in the game, and this will give you a content-driven way of teaching the game. Although that might be an absolutely enormous and tedious ask, so that's why I'm not quite going to commit to saying that, but in theory, all your campaign for a really complicated multiplayer game needs to do is achieve knowledge of the game itself, and this is the sort of mission that does that, rather than just say, play a skirmish in this situation, because you have to do this first to actually get the most out of the skirmishing style tutorial approach. I claim, with more claims flying about, it's time to blow this mission. A construction bot comes right up to my side of the map and I'm one hit from killing it, but I'd already ordered my welder to move backwards for safety, taking it out of range at the critical moment. Then the fat boy blows its plasmoid load all over everything, and it's over. We're not going to get that construction bot, which would have been amazing. That was an unheard of chance to safely take a constructor and make a base on our now fully secured western side of the map. Ah, the frustrating inadequacy. A comforting, lukewarm pool. You never get too hot or cold in the lukewarm pool. One thing I wasn't doing was reviving all of the T1 enemies. Only some are available, but others I could be bringing online to help. I was more focused on using my resurrection box to heal my current things instead. In particular, trying to out-heal tower damage so we can keep our advance going. I did get a couple of things here and there, and a few minutes later, we're at the final corner. Our gunslinger is slinging away. It's got enough levels to have high HP now, so it can tank as well. And we're just going to carefully advance, kill the infrastructure, fall back, heal, repeat, and try not to die to the constant T1 unit spam coming in. Then I discover why this isn't going to work. They have a T2 pop-up sabot turret, which does massive and rapid damage with perfect accuracy to any of my units, from not necessarily outside of my range, but outside of my vision range, and we'll come back to that in a moment. We can kill it vaguely safely, as it turns out, by using the slight range extension you get when you factor in the random inaccuracies of its attack and the area of effect. So if you attack ground on the edge of your range, you will do damage a bit beyond your range sometimes, and that was enough. So we're not done with our standoff plan yet. And the enemy are only attacking me in small groups. If they just bunched up and then attacked all at once, we'd be in trouble, but we're cutting them down bit by bit and not getting overwhelmed. We can keep this going for a while, and while I do that, there's a semi-relevant point I just mentioned I wanted to make about this game. Topic: the 1,000 micro-yard stare. By that I mean Beyond All Reason follows the RTS tradition of having the engagement range be really short for most units. Of course, its standout feature is that it doesn't do that sometimes as well, with units that can fire across the map popping up now and again. I only want to advocate for taking it further, because I think blasting things at longer ranges is fun. It's at least different. And I think other people also think that, and further I will claim for them that the Supreme Commander aspect of Beyond All Reason, i.e. the camera zoom out, the fluid controls, this sets the game up to go in this new and exciting, long-ranged direction. And the camera is the key thing, because the reason combat happens at short ranges, it's pretty much a relic of historic camera constraints. If you're playing an RTS in 1998, the camera's pointing top down with a fixed zoom level, and the field of view pretty much defines how far apart objects on the screen can interact, assuming you want to be able to see what is shooting at you, and that's a decent game design directive. Hence, in the world of RTS games, everyone has the worst eyesight imaginable. The visual and effective ranges of weapon systems is measured in multiples of lengths of the weapon system itself. As in, this tank can fight at ranges of up to 5 tank lengths, because that's how far our loser users' 600 by 420 monitors can see. Smash cut to the post-Supreme Commander world, where the camera field of view can encompass whole continents, and units begin to have ranges up to and including infinite in Supreme Commander. You might think that it's the processing power or better software architecture that lets them do this, but in game design terms, it's just the camera that lets them do this. Like, it lets you do it without it ruining the gameplay feel. In other words, it lets you have really long-range engagements and have them be fun. Now, Beyond All Reason doesn't go as far as Supreme Commander, unfortunately. It does go in this direction. You can make long-range units, and you can make a couple of moderately big units, kind of like the prototype of the idea of detaching engagement range from monitor concerns, and having map size be the main constraint instead, which is where Supreme Commander ultimately goes all the way to. But as you can probably tell, that's not what we've seen in any of the gameplay showcases so far. The extreme majority of units in the game engage at distances such as 5 tank lengths again, and I want to advocate against this, not only for the sake of doing something new, of using the gimmick of the engine more, the perfect camera system that being, but because it gives combat a relationship with the environment if you have long ranges, so that the main defensive feature of a battle isn't just going to be, well, they're more than 20 meters away, so I'm invincible. This isn't easy to achieve from where Beyond All Reason stands, because it pretty much demands that units be stronger and be produced faster. In other words, having units only engage at close range makes up for the fact that most units have a short time to be killed. You can at least be alive long enough to cross half of the map before dying instantly, whereas in a world where T1 units can shoot 1,000 meters, you'll probably be taking incoming fire on your base positions pretty much all the time. And that's what I imagine my overhaul remake, totally beyond all Supreme Annihilation, will be like. It will be absolute violence. It will be something more sci-fi. It's a bit like the vision of the game Planetary Annihilation, if anyone remembers that, another Annihilation-like, where it was more about continent-to-continent combat, only this time for real, and with a greater focus on terrain defining sightlines and cover, and longer times to kill, more shields, more anti-attack measures to sort of counteract this while the threat is still there. Well, I'm spiraling into another game demands frenzy. There is, I claim, a route to the next step outside the realms of reason. You can go further beyond all reason than this. This is still pretty normal and old school in most of the gameplay. You can take this engine that allows for infinite range combat and start using it. You can make low-level units smaller, stronger, cheaper. You can make maps more considerate in the use of open and closed terrain. And then you can accidentally delete the concept of vision range. I imagine something like this would lead to massive, constantly bombastic battles that would grind you down, even if most of the attacks you see are going to be the weak end-of-range shots just bouncing off robust shielding that's on everything. I still want to see that. It's a more interesting, neutral game state, a more warlike, a more realistic sci-fi depiction of future war than what a neutral state in the game is now, where just nothing happens because the two sides can't see each other, despite both being in the open 300 meters apart. That's not very sci-fi, mega war, the entire universe has been at war for 10,000 years. Like, that's generally the premise of these sorts of games. It's not very beyond all reason, is it? It's extremely reasonable. Well, I've got my fantasies as usual. Here's a real point on range to make before we stop here. I did want to say thank you to whoever received a mission from the UX gods to have tower ranges be marked on the ground. That's such a shield against frustration and general violation of the damage from unknown sources rule. That being, players will get mad at anything negatively affecting them by surprise, which is precisely why if your players have 600 by 420 monitors, you can't have any ranges go beyond the edge of the monitor, because then they won't see what's damaging them. That's being hit by surprise. Well, thanks to Beyond All Reason for assuming that I want to know exactly where the towers can shoot. so I'm not getting hit and being surprised by it, except when they're outside of my line of sight. This is a very weak point, basically, as demonstrated by this mission, so we better just move on from this. My sum-up point when it comes to range and vision range is that we're still stuck in the past, and we really don't need to be here. It's the future, but they've accidentally remade game mechanics from a time when it wasn't the future. That's called the past, Devon. And I've written in my notes here that this feels like being sent into the future in a time machine but not being allowed to get out of your seat. I don't know what I meant by that. I clearly had some feelings at the time about what it feels like to shoot at a short range in Beyond All Reason, and I can't get across what I was going on about. Well, let's just go back to the mission. My plan did work, we did destroy their base, but there's a massive problem. The enemy commander had himself locked in a cage, and while I'll not kink shame, I will say that after shooting over and over into the cage, and not seeing the big explosion, I began to wonder, is he really in there? Basically, our line of sight was limited. I could kind of see most of the interior of the cage, and I thought, oh, I guess he isn't in there for real. I won't waste my time trying to destroy the entire thing, and ended up walking off. I thought he must have actually been like secretly cloaked in the bottom left-hand corner, because that would be a great gameplay twist. So once again, my meta idea that this stage is all somehow about the bottom left-hand corner comes back in and caused me to go all the way back to the other side of the map to check. I found in my adventure back west that the enemy had resurrected just everything. They'd re-established their base everywhere. And I was impressed at the AI's industriousness in doing this. It's so diligent, so capable. Suffice to say, I was wrong about my quest, and I ended up wasting a load of time. So I then probed the cage a bit more and found out that yes, the commander was actually in there, just like in the corner in the one little bit we couldn't see. Really good play. They totally got me there. I wasted like 20 minutes on that post-game adventure. It was a bit fun, I guess. Having the max level gunslinger just mowing everything down is quite satisfying. We got them eventually, or did we? Because while it seems I finished the mission, on the campaign list, that mission didn't change to be marked as completed. So did I even do it? Well, I don't even know now. Somehow, I got this video that looks like me completing it, but officially speaking, I didn't. Handily, you don't need to unlock missions by completing the previous one. Otherwise, this would likely have just had me rage quit the entire game, because this mission is kind of horrible. It really doesn't play to Beyond All Reason's strengths, despite me praising all of the depth and secret tutorialization it reveals. It's better to just attack move with 500 things in a blob and not think about them, I claim. I guess there has to be something here to be a palate cleanser. That's the tradition anyway. And it did work to teach me some micro, as I said, but now let's never micro again. The next mission, King of the Hill, is the first mission where the game is like, okay, now you actually have to be good, for real, as in endgame skill good. We're entering the hard part of the campaign, and I thought the previous part was the hard part, so here we go. All you have to do is fight 7 AIs at the same time in all directions on this circular map. Quite the setup. We've done 1 versus 2 so far. How about like a 1 versus 4 as an interim? Well, it's one of the weaker AI settings, but they will naturally claim most of the map immediately. I think the game wants to teach you about rushing some of them early to eliminate at least one direction you can be attacked from. It's only that when I say teach you, I mean subject you to failure and see if you pick up any tips from that. We are officially getting Gascoigned at last, here it is. I did try, and it looked like it would work at first. My army of T1 spam killed off 1 enemy base and a commander, but on the way to the second, I was coming under so much pressure in my main base that I was 90% microing the endless combat back there, and then lost a fair bit of my army off screen while not looking at it. Then eventually I brought it all back to help defend, and indeed every unit is needed because all of this combat micro meant I wasn't doing economy stuff, which of course I'm not very confident at anyway, so it all was just trash, the whole situation. I probably didn't even really appreciate that my economy was trash, because of all of the reverse Gascoigning from earlier teaching me that what I've done here is fine, like this works, therefore this is what I think playing good looks like. We ended up in this total Stalingrad-ass battle where anything new I make goes into combat immediately, and there's no chance to build up a reserve or push out. I've got no metal, the enemy has taken the whole map, and eventually they'll go to T2 and we'll die. I do have one saving grace, and that is Reclaim. I can use the wreckage of defeated enemies to get metal, and this is key really, same as Resurrection. There are so many wrecks everywhere. If I was on the ball with Resurrection bots, I would have a massive army right now. It's only that we're nowhere close to that in terms of game understanding and mental space for that micro. My thoughts are fully consumed by the more basic things like, can I put a turret here? Can I make any units at all? And what was the hotkey to place something at the start of a build queue again? Waste 5 seconds trying to work out what it was, and you've probably lost the game by then. So yes, looking at this footage, it's now like, well, look at all these opportunities I have here. Can I complain about this? And the answer is going to be yes, of course. I'm certain in the moment I was completely overwhelmed with the business of just getting this far in the first place. I had no time for any strategy that requires me to click on more things or click even faster. That's basically going to be the biggest gatekeeper, the biggest player repulsor to Beyond All Reason, and indeed to RTSs as a whole. It's just particularly bad in Beyond All Reason, but it's also a symptom of things that make the game good. So I want to be very careful in criticizing this miserable time I'm having here. It's only that I think we need a different miserable time under different circumstances. And to the game's credit, there are some things it does to essentially make all of the complexities that are overwhelming me easier to deal with in a really clever way. In fact, there are 2 broad things it does. I'm going to split them into separate rants at different times for mercy's sake. So let's just start right now with topic, area commands, repeat commands, and my dreams. So Beyond All Reason is a game where you have a lot of commands to input. The commentary yin-yang this presents is that the potential outcome and gameplay effect of all the commands are going to be uniquely cool and have certain strategy flow states it's worth pursuing, yet they'll also mean you're constantly missing out on stuff because it's too much, which creates this less than the sum of its parts effect for the game, where basic stuff, like making wind turbines or ordering attacks, becomes this punished activity you can't afford to engage with mentally. There's always something more important or even more fun to be doing, so you can't engage with the fun that actually is there for the more basic activities, and you miss out on cool stuff. The first way in which Beyond All Reason begins to solve this problem, which it's created for itself, is area commands. This is where certain orders can be applied to a circular area, and the AI will then take control of your units and repeatedly issue that command in that area on its own. So for example, if you say repair this area with a builder, the builder automatically queues up orders for every damaged thing in the area for you, saving you a whole bunch of clicks. That UX mindset is the future of RTS gaming, I assure you, and Beyond All Reason begins to go there. I won't totally glaze the game for doing this because I've seen other games do this and do it better. Homeworld is an example that comes to mind. There's a bigger example that I'll touch on way later actually. But Beyond All Reason takes this idea to its next sensational step by adding in this repeat mode. Most stuff in the game can have repeat mode enabled, which causes it to attempt to redo whatever its last queue of orders was when it completes them, instead of just being idle. The main way you'll want to use that is to set up a ratio of unit production in a factory, like 3 tanks, 2 artillery, 1 anti-air, then hit repeat, so you know it's going to make that army with your chosen balance forever. If only this drew a consistent amount of resources from your economy by averaging the per second cost over the whole build, or even better, having it be consistent fundamentally for all units, then we could even have the economy be much less annoying with such a move, but we dream here on the Off-ED Game Grounds channel. Anyway, the most amazing thing that I managed to do with repeat command, not pictured really anywhere in my playthrough, so I'll just tell you about it, is that you can make an area command and queue it with commands to advance and retreat. If you combine this with repeat mode, the way the game interprets this is to, for example, have a group of resurrection bots behind your lines, infinitely queued to resurrect something in an area you've chosen on the front line. So when there is something to resurrect, the bots will run from their current position, do all of the resurrection orders, and then the repeat queue puts them back to their original move orders destination, like at the back of your base, somewhere safe. Meaning, the whole process can be automated. This is absolutely amazing. You can have bots running forwards, doing reclaim, doing repairs, and running back out of danger with no orders given whatsoever, That is how the game should work. That is how this genre should work. It's one of these things about Beyond All Reason that makes me think there is hope to tame the RTS genre, to make that switch from complication to complexity, to take deep and cool decision making and just put it at the player's control by being clever about your UI and UX nonsense. This is the dream. The next step in that dream would be to have it be truly dynamic, where you define a repair group that will follow your army and repair and withdraw via its own AI. You can't do this right now because your area command is a set area on the map, so you have to keep going back and changing the area as the situation changes, and it's probably going to be changing all the time. So in practice, this amazing thing I'm referring to can't actually be used, but it's now one step away from being the most amazing, most useful thing ever. There's only one reason that I'm not using it now, okay? I'm deflating my praise here, but I still believe this is the right approach, broadly speaking. They just didn't finish the idea completely. I think you can follow this avenue I'm going down here and go so far beyond all reason that the madness wraps back around, underflows, and becomes really reasonable. More on this later. This mission truly descended into what we call firefighting. Firefighting being the state of having to do more micro than you can do, but it's all critical and you're very screwed. It's a state of play that can be very rewarding if it somehow works out. But it can also be what it looks like to be in a soft failure state that simply can't work out, and you're wasting time and gaining anti-experience. That is, you're practicing playing the game wrong, which makes you worse at the game by setting wrong stuff as your most deeply wired instincts. And in a game as complicated as this, that actually does matter, I think. The no tutorial man is still here, waiting to burst out and complain. For the next attempt, I decided to switch to a vehicle-based build, away from bots. So bots and vehicles are your two primary choices in making a build. Bots are the easier, cheaper way to go. Vehicles are stronger and better value, only they're slower and can't go everywhere bots can go. Bots are kind of like goats. They can go everywhere and walk on the sides of cliffs, and you'll generally have fewer pathfinding issues with bots, so they're nice for that. But there's enough flat ground for a vehicle army to shine here. I think I prefer vehicles overall. A big development here is including in my build order, having the commander accelerate the production of early builder units instead of pushing out. This gives you more build, that mythical third stat, earlier on, which helps you with the seeding of your positive feedback loop by starting to get more things done in those first few minutes with your initial resource pool. And as with all RTSs, all positive feedback loop games really, just coming to understand these first minutes is vital. And if the game was to stoop to tutorializing anything, it should be this process, probably with a series of challenges where you have to achieve a set thing by minute 3 or second 30, something like that, to practice the fast starts you need that just make the game work if you can do them. The AI is doing this, so you have to as well, I tell you, and I shouldn't be the one telling you this. I switched back to being hyper-aggressive, and doing this with vehicles is more of a good idea than with bots because they're simply less likely to die. Please ignore here that when I get to the first enemy commander, I do die. That's because little did I know, commanders have this D-gun ability from Total Annihilation, which allows them to insta-kill anything in the game, only it takes some micro. It's this activated ability you have to pay to use. The AI is good at using it. I don't think I ever used it. Such is the standard. What I was going to say is that because vehicles die less, not only do you have more chances to repair them for free if you're actually playing well, but you're less likely to be making attacks that leave a pile of your wreckage out in enemy territory. Because in Beyond All Reason, they will reclaim that wreckage and get half the resources you spent on your push, or just revive your stuff and use it against you. This is really fun, isn't it? It's also a horrifying consideration. With vehicles though, even a handful of units is enough to put serious pressure on the AI. I'm able to get a really early group out that kills one commander in the northwest, while still having reinforcements trickling in. Our army isn't getting smaller with these pushes, and we're building some momentum. We're avoiding the need to buy defenses, because the action is all far away from our base and economy. This is exactly what Sun Tzu wanted. It's all good. I mentioned before that buildings are very weak in this game, making raiding with the weakest units in the game extremely powerful compared to other RTSs. While this extends to commanders, You might think it's some hero unit that's uber powerful, but no, 10 T1 vehicles will kill a commander in a few seconds before they can even walk into range to fire their D-cannon. Now, we're absolutely rolling. The difference between this and my bot and defense approach is night and day. The usual lesson in RTSs, that rushing is faster and easier than everything else, appears to be emerging once again. Once you're ahead, not only is that generally good in the positive feedback loop way, but it unlocks the game. I don't need to panic. I don't need to firefight. Like, now I'm playing the game. I can attack move my rush group with confidence and do things in my base at the same time. The game has mellowed to the point I can engage with it. And as a result, this rush will not only take out like 5 of the 7 opponents, but by the time it peters out, I'll have buildings to go to T2 and progress to the next part of the long-term build, albeit poorly and with no notion of T2 economic builds. It's just another day playing an RTS, another day where rushing turned out to be the meta. However, Beyond All Reason is interesting for that observation because it's not always true, and it brings to mind a broader topic: rushing and the no-rush dream. When I see RTS games discussed by non-sweaty individuals, there are always 2 gripes that come up, which are probably the thing causing the genre to remain comatose. Number 1 would be APM requirements, this barrier to entry where you have to practice bespoke keyboard inputs and lightning-fast thought, or at least there is a perception that this is needed. And to be fair, in BAR, even against the AI, it is more needed than I've ever seen in a single-player RTS experience. In theory, even surpassing things like Age of Empires and StarCraft, although as mentioned, I don't think people actually take this game as far as it goes in theory, so not really. But we're talking about commonly seen gripe number 2 right now, which is disliking rush tactics. I've seen this all over the place. There is a significant demographic that wants to play an RTS, but more like a tower defense game, an economy game, or a city builder, where you first focus on making an impregnable lair or making whatever you want, then you make a powerful army, and you go out and battle your opponent who has done the same. The gameplay would be more structured and your thought process is more focused on doing each thing in each phase. I remember in my day of playing RTS games online, like 20 years ago, you'd see lobbies like no rush in the title, or people would ask for no rushing at the start of a game. I'd guess it's not like that so much anymore because people have learnt the truth about rushing, which is that it's actually quite good. And I remember being very rushy back then because the first time I ever actually won an RTS game, I think in Battle for Middle-earth, the best RTS of all time, was because I realised you could rush and then just immediately won after doing that, and it stuck from there. Even though I don't think I liked it, and I think the no-rush people are in the right in terms of fun having. There is massive appeal in an RTS experience that has these phases and doesn't really have the combat be towards the beginning of a match. And I think in Beyond All Reason, it offers this first glance at a game that would be really good at that but isn't. Because the base building in here is so creative, it's so expansive, your defensive options for turtling are so many, and because you can make base-to-base weapons to fight from within turtled positions, it's got everything we'll need. It's just that in practice, that's such a weak play, and the AI is too good at exploiting that. Rushing is a lot better, it's a lot easier than turtling. So there isn't really a world in which you're going to have 15 minutes to make a base before the first quote-unquote wave arrives, like in a more structured game we can imagine here. You will be attacked within 4 minutes, you will be raided at all times, you must make an army, and realistically you must be the one attacking at 4 minutes. Because the AI is good enough that it will outpace you if you don't, and in multiplayer of course you have to. So yes, the meta of all metas remains. You can't really chill. Either the AI is too good and you'll lose if you play casually, or if you turn the AI down so it doesn't attack you, it actually goes the other way and becomes way too easy to beat, without actually ever having the cool endgame you were trying to build up to. Essentially, I'm gesturing at a mode where the map is divided until 10 minutes pass or something, so each side spends time making a cool base before they begin heading out to contest map control. That's a very plausible game mode that might work well in BAR, and go a certain ways to satisfying this underlying untapped market of the RTS world, the market of people who want something that feels like a city builder, something more creative and relaxed, but also with massive cool robot fights as well. I like base-to-base combat, I like huge walls of defenses. It was a shame to not be using them. The dirty word mode is looming once again, so for now, forget all that. There is only one mode. It is the mode where you rush tanks and everything else in the game is just there to be the wrong choices that exist to define the right choice, that sort of illusory build freedom. Well, I'm very salty about it all. Roll on tanks, make me happy again. The final AI built up enough that I couldn't push them out with my T1 rush, but as I said, I had by then got some T2 stuff out. Now, while I don't have the stats to hand, and they are somewhere in the game, there's no easy way to compare the differences between T1 and T2 units. Not that you have time to compare them when playing either. I was just relying on T2 units being a certain amount better than T1, to the extent throwing them in blindly would be fine. And this was the mission where I learned that indeed it was. T2 units have higher survivability, benefiting from the things I mentioned with vehicles in general, but they're also quote-unquote cheaper. In that, if you look really closely, you get more stats per cost on your units. So it's actually cheaper to make an army of a certain level of power at the higher tier, which I didn't expect. Even if you don't make a T2 economy, which would be the main reason to go to T2, but I had no idea what I was doing, so I was not doing that. Still, we can attack move our new tanks against the final AI and claim an enlightening win. The stage went from seemingly impossible to delightfully easy, with a simple change in strategy, particularly opening strategy. And barely any extra skill or experience came into things. That's probably a sign of a good strategy game. It's only I fear that this strategy counts among the only strategies you can use, because it's kind of stressful and high APM to get it going. I don't want to use this strategy, as per my previous topic I suppose, but fortunately the very next mission taught me there is in fact another way to play. And I ended up finding this new way easier and more fun. To discover this, I'm going to need to experience some failure, so let's go look at that first. This mission is essentially a 1 versus 1 against a real AI. The game has several AIs categorized as simple and barbarian, where simple is more scripted, more AI-like, playing very roughly, whereas the barbarian AI is more like a bot. It plays a bit more like real competitive opponents do and does optimal things. I believe it also cheats a little bit, because I think you can tweak this in the menu whether it does this or not. By default, it cheats a bit. And of course, it has the classic advantage of AIs in RTS games, infinite APM, so any mechanical APM concerns will just be skipped over, giving them an advantage there. One thing it doesn't get though is infinite vision range, which developers often secretly give to their RTS AIs to overcome their weaknesses. The thing about the Barbarian AI is it doesn't need that. It's actually good, or at the very least it's better than poor old me getting to this part of the campaign. It even knows about T2 economy buildings. That's going to help it out, eh? Yes, I thought the AI in this game was unusually good, or at least I felt I was bad against it for longer than in other RTSs. So I want to give it some kudos, even though I don't actually know what it's doing or how bad I am, so I can't make the judgment. Let's give it the kudos anyway. So for this one, I was back to rushing bots again, the build order I know essentially. My general idea was to try and push out a wall of guards around the enemy base so I could claim map control, and it went really well at first. However, looking closely at the minimap, the enemy are simply walking around the little edge I didn't quite cover here. And the other thing about me when I get out of my depth is that things like remembering hotkeys and remembering what I was about to do before go completely out the window. I start slowing down, and that huge army I have is just going to do nothing now. In my defense, this mission's extra gimmick is that the enemy base is defended by T2 static turrets, meaning you're not able to rush them. That's the gimmick of the stage essentially. Can you win without rushing? Hence me just stopping outside the base when I got there, if you were wondering. What I was trying to do and continued trying to do was create walls of units so I could be unpressured enough to then go through the process of reaching T2 myself. I was aware that there was more to it than I knew about, and I really wanted some security on this map to make this game my own and grow into what it's asking of me. And yes, the mission is trying to force you to go to T2, trying to Gascoigne that lesson into you. With that in mind, I struggle on trying to contain the extremely evasive and effective AI, and failing, and broadly not using my units, because I don't know what I'm doing here as I paddle with my hands in the water towards some kind of T2 build. So while I do that, I thought I'd tell you what I actually mean when I keep saying Gascoigne this, Gascoigne that, reverse Gascoigne that, because it's actually more relevant the more I think about it. Topic: should you Gascoigne your tutorialization? What this term I'm throwing about is meant to mean is a case where you demonstrate to the player that they're not good enough at the game quite early on, generally hoping to encourage them to learn the game in a different way to whatever wasn't working for them, but crucially, not saying what you mean by that outright. Of course, it's a reference to Father Gascoigne in Bloodborne, a boss theoretically designed to show you that the gameplay techniques of other Souls-likes don't work in Bloodborne, to push you towards the hyper-aggressive play the rest of the game will expect you to pull off. And when I say push you towards, that is the contentious part of all this, because it isn't guaranteed to do that, and it might do some other things instead. For example, to reference probably the most common thing it actually does, it makes people think the game is harder than it is, and it makes them cheat. I use the word cheat to mean they go to the walkthrough, they ask Reddit, they hit the internet, they type tips for Gascoigne Bloodborne into Google search. I'll consider that cheating. It's all fair enough. It's only I take issue with things when people say, well, the game teaches you what you need to know because of this, because only the most introspective player will be able to analyze their 10 seconds of thrashing around at immediate hopeless death and see what strategies exactly the game quote-unquote wants you to learn from the fight. Realistically, when the game doesn't teach you, or at least tell you in human words what it wants you to learn, people just get that info from somewhere else, because that's our instinct. It's how our species is evolved to survive, for better or worse. It does work, at least. Which brings me to Beyond All Reason's campaign, where basically every hard mission is the Gascoigne of something in the game, and the easy missions are reverse Gascoignes, as I complained about before, which is an ultra stupid way of saying they let you win without preparing for the Gascoigne moments, analogous to, say, the werewolves you fight a bit before Gascoigne in Bloodborne. Because in game analysis everything needs to be a Souls-like analogy, as we all know. In Beyond All Reason, that game I'm theoretically talking about, you'll need to know how to do something or other you haven't seen before to complete certain missions. And by putting this filter on players, some will say, this teaches you how to rush T2, this teaches you about naval units, that sort of thing, but more literally, it teaches you that you don't know about these topics, without providing a good or fun way to overcome that. We have to remember that the Gascoigne approach of game design is art, not engineering. It doesn't actually work, yet it has a certain effect on the player that the developers might want to go for. In reality, a Gascoigne moment means we're forced out of the game and into the study halls. Like, I'm here on YouTube, I'm on the Beyond All Reason website, I'm on Reddit. I'm trying to make up for what feels like, as a player, a deficiency, a weakness. I know there's something I don't know, but I don't know why I don't know it, or if it's intentional. And if anything was intentional, it's going to start getting skipped and walkthrough'd and cheated because I feel I'm off the beaten path because I got Gascoigned. This is the destructive power on the immersion and gameplay flow a Gascoigne moment can have in a world where games are quote-unquote supposed to have manageable difficulty curves and reliable guide ropes. Although I don't think the difficulty in BAR is intentional in the way that Gascoigne was. It's more that it was made by a team of experts who didn't feel a tutorial was interesting enough to make. But remember, for this commentary, I'm ignoring the reality behind all of this. In order to wax lyrical and moan about whatever I want, welcome to YouTube, baby. To put all of this another way, the problems of Beyond All Reason aren't tractable enough in the game. There isn't stuff you can do in the game to get good at the game, because the gameplay itself obstructs you from learning what's going on in it via any other method than brute force trial and error. It's too fast, it's too unforgiving. This isn't necessarily bad, because that quality is what makes it more fun to play when you are fluid and skilled. But it does present a barrier to entry also. That barrier needs to be overcome with pure old-fashioned mission design. You need to make a campaign that brings people from beginner to the level of challenge given to me now here in the current campaign. Yes, I've just invented the tutorial. Well, that wasn't that much of a point really, was it? But it remains a problem. It's come up again here. The game instructed me to complete this stage by doing something it's technically never even mentioned was possible, let alone showing me a good way of doing it, that being try to rush T2. I only know about it and how vaguely to begin that process because of the osmosis of people mentioning T2 in their T1 build order tutorials. So yes, my problem is I still haven't studied enough. Yet I'm beyond my limit for study. I'm trying to play a game. I need the learning process to be gamified. I want to have fun and learn like it's a Saturday morning children's TV show. I also believe that is indeed possible. The ultimate point is just then that the campaign needs more stages with a slower start and more simple objectives in the early stages. But I think I'll save imagining a different campaign order for later because there are more thoughts to be had on that. After grappling with the AI for a long while, I've lost some map control, but I'm holding on. Then I throw it all away, as my commander was somewhat near the front and there was totally an undefended route for the enemy to attack that position. That's not going to end very well for me. After my loss, I took a look at the enemy base, and I can see they have things I don't. They have advanced solar collectors and fusion reactors. They're progressing through this T1.5 to T2 economy build, which, little did I know, makes a massive, massive difference to your income. Even something like building the basic T2 metal extractor gives you 4 times more metal than T1. So rushing this stuff ASAP provides an enormous compounding advantage. There's a huge step up between the tiers, and I just didn't expect that. How do I now know it? Well, let's see what happened on my second attempt to answer that question. This time, I played things way safer, making a smaller T1 army, which is out there getting lost at the moment in my attempts to raid, but mainly I just bunkered down in the corner and tried to get a T2 factory up really fast. I also realized I could use advanced solar collectors, which are T1 energy generation buildings that are hard to build but give you way more energy per area than the usual solar or wind options. Now this plan of mine is one I was almost certain wouldn't work, and I was likely trying it facetiously to make a point about how using the opposite strategy to last time was bad too. The problem I expected here is that I'm giving up control of the whole map, and the enemy can vastly outnumber me and just pile on my base. The upside is I'm defending a very short line, so combined with turrets and area of effect attacks and radar, I can do a lot of damage with not very much stuff and continue on my way here. And it all begins to work. I began making the 2 basic T2 economy structures, the fusion reactor, which grants loads of energy, and the advanced metal converter, turning that energy into metal. I was surprised by how much more powerful these are than the T1 versions. I think in my metagamer brain, I didn't imagine T2 could be that much more powerful than T1. Probably because it wasn't like that in Supreme Commander. The thing is, in Beyond All Reason, T2 is basically T3 from Supreme Commander. It's a T1 to T3 jump. That's the mental model I actually needed. And you can get to the end of this tech tree in 15 minutes if you try, if you just do it, while juggling the never-ending attacks from the T1 spamming enemy, of course, which I somehow did. The problem is that it's all gone too well. I'm not spending the resources I'm making, and I'm still trying to add generation capacity. What I need now are these things I'm adding at last, the construction turrets. These add build, that mythical third currency, allowing you to increase the drawdown rate of any other builder nearby or any building project. The idea is to make a load of these near factories, so when you have a big T2 economy, you can concentrate enough build near a thing being built so it will draw down its whole cost right away. Then you can continuously make units as fast as they can drive out of the factory to make room for another. What I did with this at first is make a load of these sumo bots, slow, heavy infantry type things. I'm not really talking in this commentary about the specifics of what the units are and what they do, even though it really matters, and I'm ignoring it to give you a better impression of my thought process. I wasn't thinking about them, and didn't know very much about them. I was simply throwing out mixes of things that could fight. It should be mentioned, by the way, that you can play the game with the game paused. But not only did I not realize that until the very end, but I ultra didn't want to. That's a different game if you pause to play it. Perhaps I'll get back to that, as I've had run-ins with pause playing mechanics in the past, and probably have more to say. We're playing in real time, which I believe is the intended way to play, since this is a multiplayer game for all intents and purposes. It's quote-unquote supposed to be easy enough to do in real time. Now the sumos. Very disappointing. I cancelled the push I was making with them after seeing how slow they were and how they had very short range too, which is a devastating combination of weaknesses to have, a nice anti-synergy. The good news is that my arrays of construction turrets can be used to do something else. We can go experimental. This is what is sometimes called T3 in Bar and was sometimes called T4 in Supreme Commander. Units that are just 100 times better than everything else, but take godly amounts of resources and time to make. With enough construction turrets, you can bring the build time down from like 10 minutes to 1 minute, and it becomes viable to spam a few giga units out there. But that's single player brain talking, isn't it? Remember, I gave up complete map control. Anything I can do, the enemy can also do easier and more and faster. The only reason I'm still here is they're wasting resources making really bad trades in their attacks against me. For all I know, the entire map is covered in enemy eco, and they're making their own fleet of super units. Well, more on that in a bit. This is where I made perhaps the most important discovery in my whole BAR playing career. That is, if you build a certain amount of turrets and towers, if you have a certain amount of army, and the AI sees this, they will simply not contend with you at all. It's essentially a remedy for the problem I was talking about in Supreme Commander, where the AI would just brainlessly attack and make the same attack over and over again and keep losing. So here it seems to react to whether it's losing in the attacks and stop if they don't work. But that means now nothing is happening, it's become even weaker as a result. We enter this peaceful phase where I have a really good defense but nothing's happening at all. And I'm finally, at long last, studying the details of this economic build-up. And I think I was probably starting to understand by now this concept of build, and how it matters how many different builders are assigned to each project. I think I even realized the secret technique, that while every builder has a limited build pool, that's only for starting builds. Meaning a T2 builder can start building one fusion generator after another. Then your T1 builders and turrets will complete the construction, do 99% of the work, even though they can't make that building normally. It's only laying down the blueprint that the advanced unit actually contributes. Which doesn't really make a lot of sense. I'm so ready to scrap so much about the build trees in this game, as previously ranted. At this point, I'm probably thinking I'm screwed because the AI can do whatever I'm doing but faster. They have more space. I thought surely a no map control build with artificial resource generation can't be competitive. However, we're beyond all reason right here. And actually just having T2 economy buildings is way more important than having map control, up to the limit when you have some space to build anything at least. This is a really big twist in the usual RTS meta here. Although it's only really because the AI doesn't fully appreciate this. That is to say, the AI doesn't really use their space, they don't spam their base, or utilize the areas they capture by putting resource generation there, so they don't gain much from having map control. That means if you spam even like a small area in this corner with your resource generation, you will probably have more, and probably a lot more, resource generation than the enemy if they don't do this and the AI doesn't do it to the same extent. Basically, that's the answer to all this. It doesn't really make sense in a pure game design meta way. However, I will not for 1 second suggest that this should be changed, because this breaking of the usual RTS meta is exactly what the world needs. This mission is when I started having fun, because I realized it was possible for the game to let me have fun. And by having fun in this context, I essentially just mean lower the APM so I can read the tooltips for once. That might be what fun is for a new player in a vast and complicated game. I was able to shift from firefighting to learning and getting more skilled. And this only happened because the game stopped for a while. I wonder how intentional this is. Would die-hard developers see this and work to patch it so it's not possible for me to get this reprieve? I wonder, I fear. Well, let me show you how this all ended a long while later. I had created an army of juggernauts. Now, I didn't know what a juggernaut was, and for tooltip-based reasons we'll cover later, I didn't realize that these units are so powerful, you don't need to make 10 of them. Well, I did, for however long that took, and literally nothing happened in between. Very strange. When I finally moved out with them though, all in one group, because I'm still a basic bitch, the enemy seem to realize something is up and they swoop in to make their own attack, featuring a load of mega tanks they had sitting right on the edge of my radar range. This is plain good AI. It's attacking me at a great moment to try and stop my push. It was ready for it. It was waiting for a long time, and I was actually in trouble and started losing the front of my base. Had I done the usual thing where I have my commander at the front, I would probably lose the mission here. Luckily, I was able to weather the storm with enough base defenses plus another juggernaut or two coming out to join the battle. Our juggernauts are better than those tanks, by an unknown amount of course, and we have numbers on our side. Our losses in that battle won't matter because my ball of death walks across the map, nothing even dents them, and we kill the enemy commander. That's that. And after seeing how powerful these things are, it is evidence that 1 or 2 would have been enough to close this game out much easier and earlier, probably without the enemy having all those mega tanks. We also caught a glimpse of their base and economy and the map in general, and it's another of these important lessons I keep learning. The AI doesn't go all out when it's got downtime. It doesn't cover the map and keep building. I think it creates up to a point. Then it lets resources go to waste after that. This means we have something special in our sights here. If you can get the AI to go passive by putting on a good show of defending, or whatever the cause actually is, then you can probably outbuild the AI and get a stronger eco than them, even if you're trapped in the very corner. And I was talking before about how turtling up and gradually preparing your grand move is something I see people wishing RTS games would allow. And what do you know, possibly because of weaknesses in the AI, you can do that here. Again, I'm filled with fear that the developers will see this and go, that's a problem to fix, we'll patch this out. But for me, knowing this is an option is genuinely one of the main things I like about the game. If the game was improved in this regard, it would be worse. I would have had less fun in many of the stages to come, even though technically what I'm praising here is something that's bad about the game. The next mission builds on what we just learnt and begins to do what I think the campaign should have been doing the whole time. So let me set the stage before I rant again. It's a mission where you're only allowed to build turrets and resurrection bots. That means we're going to be practicing defense extra hard here, and to get an army, we'll need to draw in the enemy and resurrect their losses against them. This is a more advanced play technique that's unique to this game, and it's quite hard to fit into the economy and micro headspace when you have everything else to do. By removing everything else, resurrection strategies become real, so to speak. You can play a game with them, you can get into a flow, and you can base your gameplay around this one idea and thinking about how to do it, and then actually do it, your mind keeping on track for more than 5 seconds at a time. With all this in mind, it's time to talk about topic. What sort of campaign structure might work better? In particular, I ask this question with a mind to getting a player to learn all the things I'm complaining about having to study. And to answer that question, we don't have to do anything fancy at all. In fact, we only need to look to the limitations of inferior strategy games and notice that some of those limitations serve a purpose, as demonstrated in this turrets-only challenge mission. If you have a game with a million things going on, a million options, to get the player to appreciate an option, you need to focus on it for long enough. There are 2 main ways to approach this as part of a campaign structure. Number 1 is the traditional approach, where you begin the game with most units, buildings, mechanics unavailable. Then you do 1 mission per thing to unlock it, turning your campaign into a very long tutorial for all intents and purposes. I say that like it's a bad thing, but in RTS games, you generally for real need a 20-hour tutorial sometimes because they're so complicated that most people are either scared of how complicated they are, or actually don't realize they're even more complicated than they thought, with Bar being a shining example of this situation for both cases. So that's method 1, just gradually have more of the roster unlock the more you play the game effectively. But you'll want to mix in some of method 2, which is focusing down on individual things, such as in this mission. We have a campaign that occurs before most of the missions in this main campaign, in which individual things are introduced gradually. Win a battle with only your commander and builders. Win a battle with only this, that, or the other units. Air defense challenge where you micro anti-air units. No base challenge with chosen units. A mission where you can only make turrets. Go on for like 30 more things to introduce T2 things and economic micro artillery use, radar use. A stage with a gimmick, with a unique challenge for every thing you need to know about the game, even if the stage is only like 2 minutes long because of it. If it just says, get to X metal and Y energy per second within 3 minutes, that's all it needs to be. And even if all they do then is just gascoigne you and wait for you to work out how to achieve that on your own by showing you how not to do it, by letting you fail, that's still better than never explicitly testing you on this skill or implying you should have it even. But also then de facto testing you on that and 100 other things at the same time by simply asking you to play the game at full capacity. Just going, here, fight 7 AIs at once. Okay, bye, see you afterwards. And then letting that experience attempt to teach you all of the 100 things at the same time. The more complex the game is, the more suited it is to focus on this second teaching method, because it might well be that your game has the depth to support a whole hour of gameplay with only one of 100 things available to you, and might still be a fully fledged game for that time. And this is a massive strength of the detail in the combat and economy of Beyond All Reason. You really can strip away 99% of it, and you still have plenty to do. Indeed, the astute among you will notice the game already has some of these challenges I'm pining for, which is great. It's only that they aren't at the beginning. They start to teach you certain things, to at least gascoigne you certain things, too late. In fact, one of the best stages in the game is one we'll see later where you only make your weakest T1 units. It's a gimmick battle that's supposed to be really hard. It's rated as being hard by the campaign menu, because they were probably thinking, oh, it must be hard to win without any powerful units and all the strategies you're used to doing. And I say, no, it's the other way around. The thing I need to win isn't powerful units, it's just knowing what the units even are. It's having some experience at using them for anything. So a mission that says win with only 1 or 2 unit types is absolutely perfect for beginners. Put that first. Don't pretend it's meant to be hard, it's easier, I claim. There seems to be some misunderstanding here. We'll look into it later, of course. I imagine it's partially arising again from the fact the campaign was made by experienced players, and to some extent for experienced players for themselves and other developers or testers, the tutorial stage they accidentally made might have seemed like some sort of foreign mind-bending challenge stage to put in the hard part of the campaign. Maybe it makes sense from that perspective. But yes, the game does begin to do what I wanted, only the game is so complex that you can go 10 times further with this. And if you did, I think that would be an amazing step towards taking what is technically an amazing game and getting that experience into the hands of some real punters, who might then see what all of this unreasonable nonsense is about. You could make a game out of this game, only you also need to have a campaign that does let you do everything afterwards. A perfect example of that is the Supreme Commander campaign and then also the DLC campaign, which will go fully chocks away towards the end and just lets you use everything in gigantic battles. Bar as it stands has a mix of the two in a strange order. And all we can say for sure is that the minute details of the earlier stages of learning the game need their own missions. Hey, you developers, yeah, you ones working for free right there, can you please make a load more stuff for free? Then I'll stop complaining. You could make Bar into a genuinely popular game. That's the real potential reward here. The mission went well because we scared the AI into submission again, and I've got a way better economy due to my knowledge of advanced solar collectors now. But most importantly, I was able to resurrect an enemy constructor. The gimmick of the mission is that you can only make turrets, but the enemy are free to build up. However, that means if you steal one of their constructors, you're free to build up. You can make a factory. We'll take our precious captive back and begin working on an army, all while protected by Not only are lines of turrets all over the place, but the aura of intimidation they somehow create, which is stopping the enemy just focusing them down with long-range attacks. Loads of stuff in the game outranges turrets. A T1 unit can kill a turret in seconds. What I'm doing only works because the enemy aren't really trying to stop me, but to be fair, we've got to a point when I have something else on my side, the long-range T1 plasma turrets. These things can fire at long range into the fog of war and strike radar contacts. That makes it hard for the enemy to get close and achieve line of sight on our turrets. And you might think, well, why can't they make their own artillery and just do this back to us? There is a reason they can't do it. It's not the best reason, but again, I'm too scared the developers will ruin my fun if I talk about it. I'll tell you later because it's something that will come up in pretty much every mission from here on. For now, let's get to the action. The extremities of the enemy base had already been hit with long-range strikes for a while, so I'm able to easily take out the wings. Then I sit back and waited, reviving and repairing things and generally not attacking. Not sure why, because while I was sitting there, the enemy is only just teching up in the corner. We're in the exact opposite situation from the previous stage. I need to not sit back and think I have so much map control I must gain an advantage by building up, because a tiny corner build-up will work just as well. Indeed, by the time I do decide to attack, the enemy are in the process of going T3, making experimental units, so it really was turning into a reversal of the last mission. Luckily, I was here just in time to shut that down, and then we've got enough number to push on through the rest of the stuff and get the job done. I'm right in to check the economy stats. I was trying to work out if I'm any good at this. I want to see if I'm beating the AI. And while I was earlier, now it's closer, because we're facing the real AI at this stage, the barbarian AI as it's called. On to the next mission now, and this is what those in the professional game design scene call a doozy. It's another pile of 7 AIs to fight, only this time it's free-for-all rules, i.e. they can attack each other as well. You might think that makes it an easier version of the 1 versus 7 mission from earlier. I thought that too. More innocent times. Firstly, we're facing the real AI, as I said, so beating any of them is a bigger deal. And I'll tell you the second problem here in a moment. First, check out this aggressive push, playing things exactly by the rush playbook, with the Supreme Commander twist, as I'm using a couple of units to destroy my neighbour's position right away. And I've got my commander hoovering up all the metal. I'm practically overflowing with resources, an amazing thing to have in the early game, although I'm still too inexperienced to really know what to do with this advantage. For now, I'll try to lock this area down and claim it as part of my extended base. This idea of hoovering up enemy metal is the second problem I alluded to. The AIs out there, doing their infighting, will kill each other, and then the winner will revive or reclaim the loser, causing stronger economies to absorb the weaker ones and advance faster. If any victor can go to T2, we're screwed because of the numbers. One T2 opponent has the economy of 5 T1 opponents. Like, T2 is way more powerful than T1 economically. For example, you go from making a square of 4 wind turbines, say, which might give you 60 energy if you're lucky, to the same area being turned into a power generator that gives you 1,000 to 3,000 energy. The only question is, do you have the income to make them quickly? And if you're eating an enemy base, and especially an enemy commander, then you do. The first player to get a T2 energy generator will just rocket ahead. And while that could be me, since my opening went well enough for a T2 rush most likely, I still don't really know how to do that. I kept pushing west and got to another enemy base. I took it over after a long battle. My economy is starting to look really good, too good actually. I'm floating resources right here. I finally decided I had enough space and started trying to lock down my gains and go to T2. A nice idea so far, but the AI is just too good. They kept sneaking random trash raids into my back lines and halting my build-up with the most frustrating, well-microed, one terrible unit pushes, and I just couldn't handle this militarily or conceptually. I wasn't ready to accept this was even possible. Combined with regular pressure on the front lines, it was gradually sliding out of control. The enemy are down to 2 AIs already, one big one and a small one in the west as it turns out. I was trying to build up a T2 army thinking that surely those two have kept each other busy, and so I'll sweep through with a single blob and just win the game. That's the plan. That's what I was holding on for, treading water against these constant raids. Once I had my attack group, I rolled out, only to find I'd taken way too long. The enemy had defences everywhere, poorly arranged but covering the whole map, and they were high-level defences that can handle my T2 push. Very soon I got ground down to the point I decided to give up and go back. I returned to base and created another bigger T2 push while attempting to go T3. By this time the enemy had fully consolidated, so it's just a 1 versus 1 with them controlling most of the map. Not a problem we haven't dealt with before. But my push reveals they have even more defences and they've already gone T3. Whereas my T3 project, being built in a stupid frontline position for some reason, is about to be ended. Oh dear. By the time I'm being raided by powerful T3 units, I knew I was in trouble. Yet I also knew a way to deal with this: hide in the corner. I fall back and try to defend only my original base. You might have already seen that the enemy have long-range plasma cannons firing on this base, yet not so much anymore. This is another critical weakness of the AI that makes hiding in the corner somewhat viable. Even if it looks like I'm being owned up here, that weakness is that if you build radar jammers in your base, the enemy will not remember where it is. So radar jammers just remove units from enemy radar vision, meaning their artillery won't fire at will into your base. However, realistically, you can still attack ground on the place where you know the enemy base to be. You can't radar jam knowledge of a static position away from the enemy. Only you actually can, because the AI doesn't know about attack ground. So once you go invisible to fire at will, the enemy will then waste resources making cross-map artillery guns and just never fire them, thinking you don't exist anymore. But it couldn't last forever, so what I eventually tried was taking all the units I had and crusading out onto the map, thrashing through the massive networks of enemy defenses all over the place. The hope is that I would run into the enemy commander somewhere, like near the front, and snipe them down. This did not happen, and my army gradually evaporated in the face of a billion different problems out there, after which I quit. I tried 2 more times after this, but my rush went worse. I was going for a vehicle rush after the success I had with that in the previous 7 AI showdown, only things went wrong, like one enemy got in my base and kept ruining everything immediately. I had some kind of commander standoff in the next attempt, which didn't end very well for me. For my next attempt, I had a more definite plan based on everything we've seen before. Vehicle rush, yes, but only a little bit. Only take out one opponent, carving out a corner I can hide in that has enough space to make a decent base, then go heavy on walls and jammers to try and disappear from the game for a while, and rush T2 as hard as possible. Now let me gush, all of a sudden, about the one thing that makes all of my issues with the game obsolete. Topic: the controls and auto-grouping rescue this game entirely. Yes, everything I've said so far, all points raised, any details about the game, they're all irrelevant in the face of this one comment. Which is why I hid it in this random place, miles into the video, so that only you chosen viewers will get to hear it. You're welcome. The point being, this game has the best controls of any RTS, to the point it might be the only RTS in the universe where the controls are actually good TM. And unfortunately, it's not possible to debate that in any way. I've cast shade on the complexity of the controls, and yes, they can still be improved, but this isn't to take away from the fact the overall control experience is unprecedentedly good, and that's a massive part of what gives this game its potential, its vision for a future better game, that inspires me to bother trying to lay out all the things that I think a better game can improve on elsewhere in this video. The main thing I'm talking about here, the main thing I love about this, is the fluid drawing of formations onto the map. Something I have demanded from so many strategy games in so many rants over so many years. It's here. The future of game controls is here. You just drag a line on the map, and your selected units adopt whatever shape you drew. So you can draw it to match the geography instantly, and it's so fluid and amazing, and every other game should be embarrassed they didn't do this. It's so simple. It might even be the very first thing you'd think of doing if you're designing RTS controls for the first time ever. So I guess I can't glaze it that much, but somehow, the history of RTS controls is full of pathfinding glitches, contextless formation modes, units climbing over each other to advance and getting stuck, or even things like not being allowed to select many units at once, like in OG Age of Empires, where you were capped on how many simultaneous orders you could give because the past was a dark time. So thank the gods, we're in the future where you tell the units what to do, and they work out how to do it on their own while you go and play the game. We're here, giving movement orders, attack orders, formation orders, and waypointing them together in a complex way. Could just be a game on its own, it's that good of a mechanic. Basically, I don't really care about any other aspect of Beyond All Reason other than this, ultimately. I'm talking about other things to appear more comprehensive, and for the love of the sound of my own voice. But I guess I'd throw Bar away instantly if Supreme Commander had these controls. I'd throw Bar away if Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds came back with these controls. And already I'm like, well damn, it's that easy. Like, Bar now seems terrible in my mind. The only good thing about it is this really low-hanging fruit that it somehow is the only game that achieved. But no, I should never besmirch these controls. This is the future. Just give a few orders, a few move orders in Bar, then burn your PC, because gaming is over. You saw the pinnacle of PC controls. You did it. The main thing I don't love is what I mentioned before, the hotkey complexity. But the fact there are so many hotkey combos is also what gives you the level of control that other games don't offer. They had to do this somehow. And while I don't like it, I do want it. I imagine it would be fun to use the massive networks of hotkeys available. Only it can't be done in practice by a quote-unquote normal player, because the game doesn't have any content geared to learning it all or even telling you it's there. So I can't give any points here, even if the experts are screaming at the screen about how it's not that hard really and such. I'm sorry, it just is. I've checked. Ideally, there would be some way to avoid needing all of this stuff, and that's a future rant pending. There's one other really basic, low-hanging fruit hanging so low it's covered in ants tier development, that Bar makes on the RTS formula. Another one I've been caught on camera begging a billion other strategy games for over the many years. And it's so basic you probably barely noticed it anywhere in this video. When you build a unit, it goes into the relevant control group automatically. I'm ascending! I'm ascending! Yes, you can say, this tank belongs to control group 3, and then all new tanks of that type will be made to join Control Group 3 and start receiving the group's orders and formation. And it's exactly what every single RTS ever should have done with the concept of control groups. There is no excuse, there is no explanation, but here in Bar, it's finally been done. Combined with the mouse input, smooth line, heavenly control scheme, it's just so easy to do the really boring things that drag other RTSs down into the dirt. You basically tell your economy to make you an army with a certain ratio of tanks, artillery, anti-air, whatever, and have them form up in a certain line and then fight in formation to a certain new line, and replacements filter in automatically if your economy is still able to make them, and it just does it. That's the boring part done, leaving you to decide where the lines actually are and what the unit mix actually is, which is the strategy part. The orientation meetings, where I have to tell each new tank about Control Group 3 and where it is and its mission, is skipped, removing a step from the game in such a way that the complexity and depth of the game increases, as per my heavenly formula for stripping out all of the rust and debris from RTS game design. Yes, it's good. You can't tell any of what I'm saying here, by the way, by looking at it. It's good, I assure you. I, at the very least, will force you to accept that it's less bad than the usual ad-mini gameplay tangential stuff that comes pinned to the basic things you do in other RTS gameplay experiences. Hey, other games, just do it like this. Hey, time travelers, can you just make this the standard from day one? Can this have been how it always was? Just go and kidnap whoever programmed those early Dune RTSs. Tell them A man high on his own supply of copium for a janky open source strategy game from a far future year sent you back on a divine mission. And let's stop rambling. The controls are good. And we won. Yes, after all my struggles, once again it seems that being moderately careful to not make a fuss really does buy you a lot of breathing room to simply make an economy that's bigger than the AI, and then win with some kind of push later on. In this case it was tier 2 gunship rushing, which is really good in bar because of some old-fashioned jank. Gunship models have no collision, so they can all stack up and be in range at the same time, making them more massable than any other unit. I'm not sure if that's something they want to fix, but yes, the old classic rule of unit with high speed, no pathfinding and no collision is good. It's another RTS meta staple right here. For the next mission, it's another nice change of pace from the mania of the 8-player free-for-all, with another no base race kind of mission where you have a few units and need to beat the AI without making more. It's very similar to the earlier mission with the gunslinger that I covered in extreme detail, only you can revive some turrets to get a strong position on your side of the map. And while the enemy do have loads of stuff, I think they might be limited to T1. I already forgot, of course, but yes, we certainly get swarmed by a lot of trash. The units we have this time are better overall than in the gunslinger mission, and I'm better about healing them and playing less aggressively to avoid trouble, so we hack our way through the hordes well enough. Long story short, we blasted our way into the enemy base in the southwest, then proceeded north, and found the commander imprisoned for his crime of making hovercraft and naval units be on different build chains, yet soon he's out of his misery, leaving only my misery as we progress into the next stage. It's a mission of the ilk I mentioned way earlier, a mission where you're limited to making only one kind of military unit, the sort of mission that naturally fits at the beginning of the campaign, yet here it is towards the end, because it's supposed to be harder to not have your usual choices. Joke's on you, I was suffering analysis paralysis because of those choices, so now my APM can go through the roof, and I will actually compete with the AI. You can only make your weakest unit, that's the gimmick, and you have to defeat 2 AIs at the same time on a nice open map. The key, I had learned by now, was to not be too aggressive, no matter what the guides and such tell you, and try to softly scare the AI into letting you win. In particular, what I want to do is claim my half of the map, but without really committing to it. It's hard to describe this idea of being unaggressive while still claiming bits of the map, but you have to sort of defeat enough of the enemy's raids that they think you're trouble. So here my commander kills a load of enemy grunts, but note how the majority of them came up to the fight, then turned and ran away. The AI wouldn't commit, even though it would have won the match right there if it did, because they totally could have killed my commander. It's afraid! The only problem is the map is nice and open, so single units will still slip through and ruin everything as usual, since I haven't gone quite so insane as to make turrets around every building facing every direction, but I should have. So now I'll slip into this stability-first mindset I mentioned before, where all I want is to not worry about surprises. I will gradually wall off my side of the map so I can't be raided. And there are really no plans beyond that right now, just get stable, then we can plan. I do this by making a line of laser towers and construction turrets roughly down the middle. And yes, the AI has already been scared off so that they let me do this. It takes a long time to do it and they didn't interrupt. Occasionally, they'll begin a raid, then instantly cancel it and turn back when they are reminded that I'm not completely defenseless in their chosen place, and that's enough to not bother. They're probably building up loads of stuff back there, but we don't care. We're in stability mode, just make a wall and something good will happen. It's a way for a filthy casual pretending to like strategy games like me to get the fun of the game on the cheap. So yes, it's all a glitch, this fun I'm having, but please don't fix it. Here's a neat little situation. It's time to mass farm. Even in its demoralized state, the AI will sometimes try to attack you anyway, only it tries to avoid your defenses by going around them. An added flaw then is that if it can't go around them, it just runs into them anyway and dies in a massive pile. All very good, because my construction turrets will automatically repair any damage, and they will reclaim all the mass the enemy left piled up against our walls. Another ascension moment. It's automated. Yes, yes, the principle is in practice. We can grab this and say, hey game, this is how all of the other quote-unquote degrees of freedom need to work. Full automate everything rant coming soon, I bet. So we've got our much looked for stable state. Now what? Well, time to spam the only unit we have in a huge blob and attack. This is way less powerful than it looks because these units have a very short effective range. But it sure is easy to control, and that's about the end of my rationale for attack moving hundreds of terrible units and just waiting for the result. The other weakness of this is demonstrated here. When the units are really bunched up, they block each other's line of sight / constantly jank each other around, such that one way or another they don't shoot. So this attack is just more like ants swarming their prey. We cover the enemy in units that aren't doing anything, and there are just so many they can't really kill us all. Eventually I managed to move / lose most of the stuff. Then we can shoot that commander, and that's one of the 2 targets for today down, losing basically everything in the process. But thanks to my special stable setup, I've got all the time I want to make another blob. This next attack has the same frustrations. I've got a commander in my swarm, but can I actually attack it? That's a very different question. Eventually I do get the shots I need, although it requires losing absolutely everything once again, and the enemy will 100% revive everything they can get from all of this. The problem now is the stage didn't end. Oh dear. At first I thought I was facing the horror of another kill all builder units challenge, which meant I would have to sweep the entire map slowly but surely. But then I checked the mission description and it does say kill commanders. So what did I do wrong? Is this a glitch? Nay, because it turns out it is possible to make fake commanders. I don't think I ever found where you build these, but you can have decoy commanders to distract attackers. And the AI has absolutely played me in this regard. Cut to some 15 minutes later when I've got another massive wave breaking on the enemy side of the map. And it looks like we've got 2 commanders with the same name twinning it up right here. No, I'm the clone, shoot him. No, he's the clone, shoot him. Well, we can shoot them both. And something amid the mess explodes everywhere and the stage ends. That mission is certainly one of the best in the campaign, or campaign-like thing, as I said. It's simpler than regular matches, so it probably has a place at the beginning as a 1 versus 1 to learn micro and raiding and handling enemy rushes, that sort of thing. I'm here having fun with this. It should have been a Gascoigne nightmare at the start. The next mission is another good one. We've got a Europe-looking map, and the continental area is divided into 2 teams, duking it out, whereas we sit on the islands in the corner on our own 3rd team, and must eventually dive into the fray and win the whole thing. It's a perfect mission for my new favourite plan, don't attack for most of the match. We can sit back and do our thing, trying to build up for an eventual win. However, I encountered some issues with this one. First, we can see here a single enemy unit being ultra annoying in my back lines. Yes, the AI continues with its characteristic skill and micro in attacking you with 1 or 2 things via a route you didn't have line of sight on. It's just so good at this. I don't remember ever facing an AI like this in an RTS. And it's certainly a lot better than Supreme Commander. But of course I will argue that Supreme Commander's AI being bad is part of what makes the game work as a gamer-facing experience, but enough of that for now. You might think, if we're building up here, why have I barely made a base? There's a simple reason. Nukes. Yes, you can nuke large areas to kill everything, and the AI will do that to you. I 100% believed they would never dare, for the simple reason that the Supreme Commander AI doesn't. But it's true, if you do nothing for long enough, the AI will start obliterating you, meaning the whole hide behind radar jammers exploit doesn't give you infinite protection as it turns out. And as I learned the hard way, the AI didn't really attack me normally, but they did systematically bomb zone after zone on my islands until I was down to basically nothing. And that's that really. It's not the most vexing situation because you can just make an anti-nuke thing that just nopes all nuke attempts in your region of the map. Therefore, I'll try again, remember to make that thing at some point, and try to be even more vigilant with my patrolling ships and towers and turrets to avoid there being places the enemy can secretly attack while I'm not paying attention. So we're just going to let me carry on with this attempt while I tell you about something that I would say is the number one thing I remember not liking about this game, which so far I haven't even mentioned at all. And it could be said it doesn't really matter. What on earth could that be? Topic: the units often look kinda stupid, plus other visual/mood problems. One part of me thinks that inheriting short-range combat from Total Annihilation is the main curse of the Annihilation bloodline. But actually, when it comes to things that might turn people away from this game, there is something simpler. The units look kinda stupid in 3D. When I think about what I don't like about the game, I don't actually think, wow, the AI is too good, or whatever I've been trying to lay out as the game's problem. I think its visual design and its lore is uncool. The Beyond All Reason roster is way too faithful to a low-resolution 1997 2.5D fixed zoom level game for a 2026 3D free camera game. The visual language of the units looks wrong now. As in, back in those days, if your unit design was, it's a gun turret on top of a box, that's enough, because all the unit needs to communicate to the player is what its weapon is and what direction it's facing. There is no spectacle, no lore built into the actors on our stage. We don't got pixels for that, and gameplay considerations mattered more. Fast forward to now, where half the time units have a bajillion more polygons and the resolution is higher. We don't need a unit to be 95% gun turret to communicate that it has a weapon. We can make units like in the sleeper classic Homeworld Deserts of Karak, where lore comes first, where it's all design, no gameplay communication functionality, because real cool machines are not designed to be looked at exclusively from above on a CRT monitor. There's your big money problem with Beyond All Reason, if there ever was one. With UI design probably feeling its ears burning right now, but we can complain about that another time. If you look at the fighting, it can be quite unepic, especially compared to Supreme Commander, because the units are basically upscaled, low-poly models, but with proper lighting and 3D rendering now, and that makes them totally look like toys. They look like actual models, plastic toys with minimal detail and exaggerated empty features, where polygons fill in the gaps between the pixels where there was nothing before. Supreme Commander does this better, and there's plenty of room for improvement beyond that frontier. And not just in terms of unit design, I mean everything. Bar's combat is more tame, with slow projectiles, small explosions, quiet sounds, few projectiles, nothing rapidly fires. And all of this contributes to an overall unepic, small-scale feel that is totally against the spirit of Total Commandulation. I put it to you. It's a little thing I don't really want to cover much, but it must be said, I did think about this constantly, and I still think I don't want to go back to the game because of this and no other reason. It's not epic enough, it's not cool enough. It's got all the mechanics I want, but they're just not hitting, they're not delivering. Whatever the game can do, it's not doing it when you actually play it. And by that I mean, this epic future war between infinitely large armies over 1,000 years, it's actually kind of boring. It's just two boxes driving really close to each other and then one slightly explodes quietly. Okay, that was the war. In other words, I think remaking Total Annihilation's game mechanics is all well and good, but remaking it graphically and design-wise was a waste. Sure, it's harder to come up with original designs, but it's disproportionately effective work. It makes everything else seem better. The game lacking cool units and just a cool feel visually in the gameplay to promote it visually is a problem, is a real problem. Or it's a problem in the how do we make this the most successful strategy game ever thought exercise we're doing here today, ignoring that this is open source and such, as I'm doing with all of my comments here. Obviously the work to be done there is infinite and it's quite difficult, and that's probably a large reason why it's not been done. So let's just leave it there, but this had to be said. I think the designs of probably half the stuff in the game or more are actively bad, and it gives a bad impression. It hampers the enjoyment of the action throughout. This isn't really a game about graphics, but it could be, and the graphics it has now aren't neutral. They are actively poisoning the rest of the game. I had managed to achieve my goal of fighting the AI enough to be forgotten about for a while. However, I wasn't fast enough. The Continental War ended in one side taking over everything, and now they're spamming experimental units at me right as I was hoping to build up an experimental army of my own. I had spec'd a lot into Navy, so them having big mechs that walk up onto my islands is a bit of an issue. Fortunately, naval units are pretty powerful, as I said, and they're pretty long range compared to most of the game's short-sighted units. So as long as the fighting is on this island, they can't really escape my constant bombardments. I end up sacrificing part of the base in this massive danger close attack, but it does stop the enemy, and my build-up continues. Economy-wise, I've got an overproduction problem. A better problem to have than most, but a problem nonetheless. Looks like I've got the idea of a T2 economy figured out, but I don't have an instinct for how much production capacity we need. In other words, how much build we need, the mysterious number at the core of the economic balancing act. I can add more construction turrets and factories to get more build going. I had issues in that the enemy were using long-range artillery to attack my ships, so I tried moving forward with my ships to see what I could see on the mainland, only to find the enemy sneakily attacked through the opening I left by doing this. Even when it's basically being exploited, the AI is still too good to be easily fooled. We end up stuck in a pretty large experimental defense challenge where more and more massive mechs kept walking over to us, ignoring whatever defenses a sea being here might offer. We kept taking them down, and you can also spot armies of amphibious units on the seabed that the AI is refusing to commit to these battles, which is excellent news. We've still got them too concerned to attack properly, and that's the only reason we're alive. Dumping those units on our west coast would obliterate our base, especially because T2 economy buildings can explode with nuclear force when damaged. Once again, I'm really glad this didn't happen, but I guess it should do it to punish me for sucking, shouldn't it? As always, and as in all scenarios, I find myself saying, just let me suck. I had fun with my naval build-up plan, working or not. I held on for long enough to get a few of my own juggernaut mechs out, whereupon we'll give the enemy a taste of their own medicine. Whereas I had a massive fleet of ships to stop attacks, the enemy, it turns out, have basically nothing back there, and this is the key weakness of the AI. Again, if they didn't do this, I wouldn't have fun with the game. So while I'm noting this is a weakness of the AI, it's a strength of the game. I actually wanted to win. I didn't want to have to get good first, or rather, I'd spent so much time getting good enough already, and I think I was decently good by this point, that it just can't be harder than this, without giving out some rewards, some content first at the very least. So I'm happy to say that the AI wasted their massive economic advantages. They totally could have stopped me, both by attacking better and defending better, but still, this is the most skilled RTS AI I've faced. While I did lose a mech or two, I was building them fast enough that it didn't really matter. All that remained was the slow process of walking across the map, killing everything, and this was sped up by the enemy generously having all their commanders on the west side of the map, allowing me to ignore the east side in the end. I even got some use out of my navy, as it could come up the fjord-like sea towards the middle and clear out a decent zone as well. Delightful, there it is, the officially "this is what strategy casuals would think is the best strategy worked in the end, and I really don't think I could do this any other way without getting good at the game, and as I said, I don't really want to for some reason. It's fun like this. I only jab at this strategy because I know true strategy heads out there are like, you should have invaded immediately, you should have finished the game in T1 with a certain rush build. And I say, yes, I know, but to quote ancient gamer legend Kyle, I am unskilled. Well, that could be a problem because next we've got a real test of skill. It's a 1 versus 3 against the good AI on none other than Seton's Clutch, the most famous map from Supreme Commander, and the only Supreme Commander map I have actually played multiplayer battles on, ones I believe I lost while playing team games for some kind of thing in university. Let's see if that experience helps here, where pretty much you're going to get swarmed by a load of stuff, but because the map has a nice choke point in the middle, you can at least control the flow of non-amphibious ground units by fortifying the middle. The plan will be to establish a too scary to attack looking position in the center, and then attempt to mainly play this stage as a naval battle to secure the ponds and see what we can do from there, keeping in mind that the enemy have way more resources and micro than me, so realistically, it's going to be a case of spamming defenses and trying not to totally lose control rather than actively gaining control. A glorious strategy, my lord, you cry. While we get this rolling, let's bring out the next rant. Topic: ways to simplify the economy so I don't crash out like I did near the start of the video. Let's get creative and dream up a dream of a more simple take on Beyond All Reason, trying to sneakily make this one of these simplicity makes it more complex affairs, where the aim is to lower the skill floor and ceiling to the point where they are visible, so as to encourage greater adoption and mastery of those depths or indeed heights of the gameplay. And I hate this floor ceilings analogy as well, so let's ignore it from now on. What do I want from this game? What would stop me crashing out and ranting about how you can't play perfectly or instantly understand it the moment you boot that exe, and thus the world must burn, etc. Thing 1. Move from having 3 resources to 2. This is my biggest, perhaps most controversial suggestion. You might say, there are 2 resources, but I'm counting build as a resource, because it's managed in the same way as metal and energy, as in it's a flow based on a capacity to generate and use it. Only it's kept secret for no particular reason. My simplification beam here will zap us down to 1 resource and 1 capacity to make the resource, which will be shown on the UI as if it was a resource itself. And then baked into this will be a simplification along the lines of 100 build means 100 resources per second, so the cost of a tank worth 800 resources would be shown as 800/8, the 8 meaning its default build speed from its unaugmented factory. But if you have builders assigned to the factory, it might also say 800/2 to show its increased rate, with perhaps a nice fastest possible build speed of 1 per second on all build projects, with the aim of mentally mapping out how much build it's worth putting into a project to min-max it, and ideally I'd have factories and buildings all give you the same amount of build to make that maths easier and more at a glance calculable without relying on the UI. Always a nice goal to have, I think. Here's thing 1.5, a bit related. I talked about this before, but having builders be able to build anything, or factories have wider pools, probably slots in here as well alongside thing 1, so I'll mention that again. Big thing number 2 though is queue things cleverly. One thing that I think Bar as it stands could try is that if your income isn't sufficient to support beginning a new build, as in if you start drawing down a resource then it will take your generation rate below 0 and or drain the stockpile below 0, it will detect that this will happen and wait until you have the stockpiled resources instead, so you don't go negative in either flow rate or stockpile. This means you can always build continuously, and it will naturally try to finish things it's already doing before starting the new things you've queued up. It needs to work like that across the whole economy, not just single buildings or anything like that. It would make the whole flow-based present tense economy easier to handle in a game that's also trying to be a tactical combat game, I claim, so you can efficiently queue up economic commands to be performed when the capacity to perform them comes through. Don't just start doing it now and break the economy as a result. That's what I want to ask the economy to do. This avoids having everything draw down too little at once, which creates this everything finishes last effect, which I was ranting about when I was analysing quote-unquote the economy of Spellforce a while back. Essentially, it's much better to do one thing at a time than to do everything at once, because you get some utility earlier, but the game doesn't support that. It would be much easier to play the game if it did without the game actually changing in any way, so it lowers that skill floor. And the game can do this, I claim, so there's my point. Now those 2/2.5 points I just made might be enough to make me happy, but I've got this third thing, which is actually a topic unto itself, so what I'm going to do is leave this for later. For now, let's just mention also that those two things I just said could also reduce the skill ceiling and hence the depth of the game. In theory, this is the risk. They'll make the game worse for a truly expert player. But they will encourage more exploration of those depths by everyone else, by making the micro easier and the mistakes less punishing, giving us the same overall experience of most of the game considerations and most strategies, only you'll learn them faster and come to appreciate them better. I claim. At least it's an easier way to deliver the real gameplay behind all the mess than the other thing I've been advocating for, that being come up with a really complex campaign structure that teaches you all of the lessons organically through gameplay, because there are just so many to teach. I think that's a really tall order, despite the fact I'm also ordering it. If you've played Rusted Warfare, a Suprionation-like with one resource and an even simpler economy than I've proposed just now, you might know vaguely where I'm coming from with all this. Even Supreme Commander itself is an example of what I'm getting at with its superior building system, I will argue. Well, speaking of Supreme Commander, let's see how my open source Setton's Clutch experience is going right now. It took more restarts than pictured, but I finally got an attempt at this mission where I achieved the AI lockdown across the whole front. I only just went Navy in time to get torpedo launchers up to dissuade their amphibious and seaborne attacks, but once I did, things went into that familiar quiet mode. And I spent time trying to get the economy working while also spamming out torpedo launchers absolutely everywhere, and beginning to make a navy of mostly submarines in the corner. With my grasp of how to scale the economy at T2 now having improved, I was able to get to the experimental tier around the same time as the enemy, and go straight for the most expensive one too, the Juggernaut. I didn't wait around to mass up first, I went to raid with it, finding that it didn't really cut through everything on its own, and even with naval support I didn't get very far. But I did pull it back in one piece, and remember, healing units is 100% free in this game, so any unit that doesn't die can come back and do the damage again. Nothing is lost in losing 99% of your health in a raid. All I need to do then is use the peace and quiet of being behind 10 million torpedo launchers and towers to make a few more of these giant robots. And then I end up attacking in a couple of places at once and making real progress. As mentioned before, the AI doesn't totally lock down their bases like they could. There seems to be a certain amount of defenses they will always make, no matter what. They make them in weird places, but they don't go beyond that. That's probably a great thing for game design, because systematically attacking a fully turtled base every time would be annoying, no doubt. However, I think it should happen sometimes, perhaps an idea for a mission where they pre-build an ultra-turtled base for you to overcome. We dominate on land. The sea's a bit harder to clear up, but we've got submarines all over the shop, so eventually we'll claim the win here. Now that was a really good mission, I thought. This next one, well, it's a mission alright. We head into this speed metal stage, where you have a few minutes to win before a scripted attack obliterates your base, so you have to rush and snipe the enemy commander. You can mine metal anywhere, that's what speed metal means, so build orders are completely out the window, meaning I had to restart this stage over and over to get some plausible build going. I'm attempting some kind of gunship rush, but that's actually quite a slow thing to rush. The actual problem though is the precise way they enforce the time limit, is that several of the most powerful land units in the game are coming towards your base along that long causeway, so any land rush would have to deal with them. I secretly suspect that some kind of EMP strat would be good here, where you knock them out for a few seconds and run past them with a load of T1 trash, then kill the enemy commander. But remember our Gascoigning here, remember what I know. I barely know what units are in the game. I haven't used most of them. We're still too early in my experience for a gimmick stage like this, really. This kind of feels like a post-game challenge. Right now, I need a mission that's like the T2 Strat Bomber challenge that just shows you the build order and timings and gets you used to using some particular class of unit. And I guess, to some extent, this mission is that, but in Gascoigne form, you could say, like in the same way that jumping off a cliff teaches you the importance of parachutes in retrospect. Well, I got a gunship rush going, but it was not enough to make the snipe happen. All I needed to do was improve all of these specific efficiencies of the build order and get more of them sooner, which was doable. However, I was quickly learning over the coming failed attempts at doing this that the stage's time limit is quite variable. The behemoth tanks coming for your base take between 4 and 7 minutes to reach you if you don't interfere. So that's a big difference in a build where all the key units come out at the end. So like 4 minutes of time means you have nothing, 7 minutes of time means you have everything. So yes, failure after failure ensues. And I eventually got something going where we're still alive after 7 minutes. I'd gone more for bombers instead of gunships, as they really are just a better choice as it turns out. You only need to get a few through to finish the job, whereas you need a whole pile of gunships. And while our base was getting killed by regular T1 raids, the all-in rush worked and we do get the win. A strange mission indeed, too gimmicky really. I guess it's here as a pace change after the Seddon's Clutch mega war before it, but I was too inexperienced to enjoy a curveball right here. The economy is too complicated a thing to then have the rules change at any point during the campaign. That's really only something an expert can take in their stride, I would say. Now, there are two important notes to bring up for this commentary. I missed a mission somewhere back there, oh well, and also this next one is the last one I did due to general exhaustion with the difficulty level. It's another 1 versus 3, which we did already, only this time the map is more open and it has more metal on it, giving the enemy's head start in having 3 commanders more potential to snowball, and giving the AI's amazing raiding ability plenty of chances to attack from every possible angle. That's what makes this mission a cut above the Seddon's Clutch thing. The game recommends you raid the enemy as hard as you can to avoid them building up. But I was instantly like, no, I'm not going to do that. I've tried and failed this. I have quote-unquote been taught in the Gascoigne school of what counts as being taught something that you should only ever defend. And that's the best strategy. That's why I'm here, at difficulty rank 10, the end of the campaign, to begin with. However, on an open map, there is so much you need to defend to get the AI to back off, that we're in for a challenge here. While I flounder, let's take the opportunity for another topic. Make the revival mechanic really easy, and I will use it. I mentioned ages ago that while I like the whole area control and repeat command thing that theoretically makes repairing and reviving quasi-automated, and that this is an amazing innovation for RTS that Beyond All Reason brings, there is still a game that does the same thing better. For that, we have to look slightly outside of RTS, and indeed, if you ever want to improve any RTS mechanics, you just have to check other genres, because other genres actually change over time, so there's more stuff to steal. For me, I'm heading to the land of tower defense build-em-ups, the Factorio-likes if you like, because the game The Riftbreaker already has the perfect system of building and rebuilding a base. All it does differently is it remembers where all your stuff is, so that if your base is damaged and you simply want it back, you click a big area palette on the relevant area, and the game just automatically finds the resources and rebuilds everything for you over time. This is such a luxury, and I so wanted it in Beyond All Reason, because the principle I want to encourage here can be summed up as make each decision once. That means if I choose to make a line of towers and buildings or whatever in a place, and they get destroyed, our principle demands that I don't have to make the decision about where to place these buildings again, I should have the option to say, put it back how it was, and that just happens without my input, so that the flow of strategic thinking is as long as possible, if that makes any sense. I'm not interrupted. If, in my mind, my unit production has been put in a certain place, and I'm now further along in my thinking, doing something else, with that location of my production in mind, if that production is disrupted, once that's dealt with, I need to say, and I'll go back to what I was doing before, and have all of the previous rungs on the ladder, all the decisions I made before, still stand, so I can carry on building what I was building before, building in the figurative sense. Oh, this is hard to explain whatever I'm talking about here. But I bet in this game, if you had a rebuild it option, most players would just click that rather than spend the time going back through the menus to find all of the things they had and putting them down maybe in slightly different places. Even though it's probably better to make a new base, just skipping all of that frees up time to do something else. And more importantly, it makes the whole affair less of a disruption to whatever you thought you were doing in the game. Again, people will say that the disruption is the whole point, and then I just claim it's more fun if it wasn't though. It's not like we're technically removing the disruption either, we're just hopefully making the whole disruption experience more fun or less unfun. Yes, like any good idea, you can't necessarily say it's fun, but at least it's less unfun. It's the core premise of real-time strategy. The fun side of strategy gaming was already sucked away by the turn-based strategy games. Well, that's a whole different rant. Automate repairing, rebuilding, reviving. Take the idea that the game already has about designating areas for orders, and just ultra streamline that, like in the other games the dirty casuals play. Because I think it will take the disparate ideas of bar happening all at once and tie them together a little bit more and make the game better. Perhaps even the best. Speaking of the best, let's see how I'm performing in this mission. You might have noticed my problem. Every time I do something, one or two enemies get by my defenses and get some extremely high value damage in, like killing a metal extractor with one rover. And I'm trying to cover all angles with towers to scare the AI off as usual, but on an open map that means a lot of towers and resources and time, and the calculation comes out looking pretty bad for us there. After many failed attempts, I finally switched to simply doing what the game said you're meant to do, that is raid early on. I started rushing ticks, the weakest unit in the game, because even these can kill extractors and constructors, allowing me to potentially prevent the AI from expanding if I have these things all over the place. This works in principle, but once again it's my attention span that lets me down because I can't possibly micro that process while also doing the early game economy build-up and looking over all the numbers and such, and the end result is just that my raiding and booming get both a below average performance. Essentially a tick rush, but you really pay attention to it and are confident with the eco. That's the intended answer here. I ended up drifting back to thinking, what if I made huge walls of defenses and just hide until I win later? And again, we can scream reverse Gascoigning, we scream Peter Principle, because what I thought the winning move would be is actually a bad one in theory. But unfortunately, it works too well on the way to the big leagues, so I'm inclined to use it here in the big leagues, even when the advice of the big leagues is not to do it, it seems. I've developed a suboptimal playstyle in Beyond All Reason, meaning I can't do the final missions, meaning that the universe has wronged me, and I must complain about this on the internet. I guess I know what I would need to learn to do, but I'm not willing to learn it, without some assurances that there is a fun game attached to learning it. So I'm not going to fix this self-inflicted problem, and therein is the game designer's problem to solve in this situation. Now I've got another problem for you. I just found out that all the footage I took after this attempt at this mission is just a black screen in which some audio and mouse movements were captured somehow, but nothing else is. This happened when I played StarCraft as well. I think the gods don't want me complaining about RTS games. So basically this video is very radically, very suddenly going to come to an end with certain things unsaid. So what I will do now is basically do some premature summing up of the game and use my remaining footage and B-roll to go over the topics I still wanted to get to, and then we'll just sort of call this mess a day and get out of here, while pretending this was a complete look at the game. which of course we're already doing because I'm playing a multiplayer game in single player, so it definitely isn't a complete look at the game or the intended game, well, I'm just setting the bar low for my conclusion in this analysis. Topic: would it be more fun if I didn't play the game? And I ask that question not really as a facetious remark, but as a way to introduce the idea of increasing the amount of automation in the game, in such a way that I, as a player, might get to do more stuff, counterintuitively, in the manner I keep ranting about where one task removed leaves room for some other task to bloom and deepen. And what I mean specifically by all this is, I want the game to play itself to a greater extent. I've mentioned how you can have the AI set up repeating loops of behavior, a very basic programming method essentially. What I want is that, but more so, where the AI's role in the game is extended to being your subordinate. You tell the AI to go air, and it does it for you while you scout. You tell the AI to make defenses on this line, and it makes constructors and does it while you micro-combat. Obviously this needs to be optional, and it's probably going to be worse than doing it yourself, but crucially, it's better than not doing it. Which is the situation we're left with if a novice player was really to commit to playing the scouting or the combat, or swap it round, have the player micro the economy, and let the combat automation hold whatever lines you specify, push when you say so, but not necessarily exactly how you say so, because you're sticking to getting that T2 perfect economy rush in the background. In many ways, I'm describing a team game in multiplayer, aren't I? My vision is essentially that your own units, your own UI, is itself half of a player that will do tasks for you in the game if you want it to lower the skill floor without lowering the skill ceiling. It's a big ask. Only Bar actually does start going in this direction already, and it's gone further with it than I've seen. It simply needs to finish that idea. Instead of me setting up a loop of orders to revive frontline units then withdraw to safety, I need to set a revive and run away algorithm going and let it decide when to do it on its own, i.e. how the AI on the other side actually already works. Yes, they've already done some of the stuff I'm asking for here, further increasing my willingness to ask this of an open source passion project with no money, although yes, that latter point will happily invalidate pretty much all my complaints in this video, I know. I simply have a dream of an RTS game where the downsides of it being in real time are offset by having a team below you. And because I hate humans, and humans hate being bossed around, it should probably be the game's own automated systems that fill that role. I am the Supreme Commander, but my chief of going to T2, who I've given all the builders to, is doing a good job throwing cool units my way, and I'm doing some cool combat stuff with that sort of thing. You're left with an optionally simpler game that's easier to learn with more ways to play, more styles, more fun, and all it costs is making the programming orders of magnitude more complicated and hard to test. Yes, there might be a reason games don't do this, but we are, as you know, currently beyond all reason, so please let me have some algorithm handling bombing runs for me while I sit there attack grounding artillery into the fog of war, or whatever degenerate activity I wish to do with my game time. Please. So the quick end to my gameplay story here is that I lost this attempt once more, got mad because I felt too far away from the skill level needed to win, and then I didn't try again. There was at least one mission after this one which I also gave up on without even looking at it, and that was the end of my Beyond All Reason campaign. I did actually play the game more after this, which is a miracle. I play a lot of games that don't feature on this channel, but the ones I do feature, I almost never play them outside of this channel. It's all business, the stuff I present here. With Bar, I actually kind of like it. It's actually kind of my thing. I played skirmishes and tried out the Alien Raptor Defense Mode thing, a really cool thing that I lost all of my footage of and then went to get more for the purposes of mentioning it here. Blah 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 blah, it was good. in some way. Like, let that be my endorsement of the game. I actually played it voluntarily, and I usually, for most games on this channel, don't play them voluntarily, like after I finish talking about them. Now let me give you some premature sum-up thoughts. BAR, as I said at the start, is a necessary step forwards. It's all the more amazing for the fact it's free and open source too. That said, BAR itself isn't good enough to be an actual example of what the future of RTS should be. It's more like a spiritual successor to BAR, a sort of hypothetical spiritual successor to BAR, the same way that BAR succeeded Supreme Commander would then be the next step. And this successor to BAR I'm imagining is actually kind of just a successor to Supreme Commander, just a different one that I'm imagining here. Basically Supreme Commander, but with BAR's added innovations. That's what I want. Whereas BAR is more like a successor to Total Annihilation with some of Supreme Commander's innovations, so it's not quite in the right direction or it's gone to the wrong place. I need to tweak the recipe of this potion so that we have cool units and simple build orders and bigger maps, bigger explosions. Keep the amazing controls, keep the customizable orders, and the general considerations of big brain, high skill ceiling plays. The things that are wrong with BAR, those being that it's both sweaty in its gameplay and then childish in its presentation, are killers for me. But those are things a successor to BAR can easily not have, while learning all the lessons that the BAR experience taught us along the way to make it all that much better. Beyond All Reason 2, even further beyond, will be the beginning of the next RTS Renaissance. And for that, I want to throw my support behind Beyond All Reason, despite my complaints. This is the correct direction. Big studios have done some elements of this better, yes, but those are more superficial. We can work that out later. The core, the complexity, the nitty-gritty of BAR is unrivaled. It breaks new ground. And that's why even a hater like me is willing to call it good. And that's got to be something. And yeah, it's literally free, so who even cares about its problems? You might as well try and play this if you're even vaguely interested in RTS games. And you definitely should if you like Total Commanderation likes, or whatever I was calling them. Right, with that said, let's moan about more things while I show you this miraculous new footage I got later of me failing the cool alien things, which we'll not even talk about the gameplay there because look how long the video is already. Topic: the UI and tooltips kill confidence in the game. I might have hinted at this somewhere, but other than thinking the units kinda look like toys, this is the number 2 producer steps in to demand things point that's totally separate from any game commentary. The UI, and especially the tooltips, kinda suck, and it gives a really bad impression, and I think this does actually matter. It probably stops some people from giving the game a fair chance. Again, the developers don't need to care because open source games don't need to be given a chance. They've got nothing to gain from people liking the game, so why bother making it good, the developers can proclaim. Well, for the sake of argument, let's take a look at these tooltips. They're the only ones we've got. The quickest way to sum up what we're looking at is that the information is more aimed at the developers than the players. It's a difficult to parse mess of stats that blatantly includes internal data keys like that armor class thing, where the tooltip here is supposed to take that key identifier and look up something to show here, as in the class commander armor type refers to having level 5 armor or something, and by the gods, there's probably a whole world of armor type considerations going on behind the scenes in the unnecessary nitty-gritty of combat here. Build is in here, the mythical build, the secret third most important number in the economy, or even first if you're overflowing, stated with no units, no information on what it even is, but this is where you can find out that it exists as a mechanic. You have to go on YouTube to get explanations for this. Of course, we've got all of that DPS and weapon type stuff going on. Like a lot of the game, it's probably useful if you learn to read it and you know what to make of all this. But all I have to do is dump out the point that this approach won't win you any friends. And I needn't really suggest anything in particular, I'm just making that point. I suspect the game itself, the mechanics, would need to be simplified before you can make a truly readable tooltip for unit stats, and indeed a readable tooltip whose intended use case would be to be studied for 0.3 seconds amid a high APM RTS game. This is the hardest tooltip design scenario, perhaps in all of gaming, and this definitely isn't the solution. Across the rest of the UI, it's very functional. White text on black, game engine default style looking buttons. All your commands are in grids, a very military style where it's designed for maximum functionality for experts, which comes with the unfortunate side effect that everyone in the potential audience of the game isn't an expert. I know these are vague points to make, but they do actually affect gameplay, and more importantly, they affect the sense of confidence in the game. That's what I wanted to really mention here. Just looking over the options menu or those tooltips, you get the sense that the game either isn't done, or it quote-unquote wasn't made for you, to sum it up with a random phrase, a sense that you're being served a product that is haphazardly made, which is bad because it's lying. Yes, the UI is like this, but it's because the developers focused more on interesting and important things, so the bad impression the UI and overall visual design of the game gives is actually misleading. But that only goes a short way to defending it, I claim. You always have to remember that these boring basics are your first impression, so to speak. They define how charitable an uninitiated person will be to the game. And again, that's another key phrase, the uninitiated person. This game thrives on the initiated person, the person who sees gameplay on YouTube and is willing to accept the UI, willing to read up and study to get to that gameplay, like me for example. It's all rescued by the game secretly being good. But for this game to gain the influence that I want it to have, it's going to need a big UI UX overhaul, which I'm almost certain the veterans and developers aren't interested in. And we end up in the beta complacency trap thing I occasionally reference, where a game's direction is mainly being pushed by the inner core of early access or beta or insider players whose massive familiarity with like alpha and beta mechanics cements those less developed parts of the game as being integral and no longer subject to change. They become required in the mind's eye of the developers, and it now goes without saying that they're not going to be revisited, leading to us being stuck with certain elements that the developers don't consider worth complaining about, yet are immediately noticeable and problematic from the perspective of outsiders. And I should know, I worked on Godless Tactics, which has a fair few of those. And that rant was inspired by the tooltips and general UX of the game. It's an affront. It lets the game down. It kills confidence in the developers, whose work is actually better than this. And I guess I don't really know why they don't improve this stuff, because the game is held back by bad presentation of key information. We'll leave it there, but one small extra point I wanted to raise about UI UX stuff is that one nice option might be to have damage numbers appearing, to help communicate or give a sense of some of the numbers involved in the gameplay. You could do this for reclaiming resources or generating resources. All kinds of places exist to have number pop-ups, perhaps grouping similar and proximate sources together, basically showing you when resources are being added or lost from the pool, what damage is being done by units, in a very passive way that's probably better for learners than not doing it at all. And of course it's easy to have an option to turn it on and off in the menus and such. Now I thought I would finish up with one more topic here, because I just can't be stopped and I didn't get through as much of the game as I planned, so allow me to continue with topic. What's a single cool thing you want to see added to this game, plus the end? I present that question both to you and myself. I asked myself, ignoring all the nerdy producer-like, there are too many build trees for the peasants to understand type comments. If we simply take the game as it is and ask, what will make this cooler? What's the answer? I touched on unit design earlier, and that's a clear contender. And I touched on the slowness, the shortness, the lack of action almost. Bar is a gentler game than Supreme Commander. I think the engagement ranges need to go up, the size of explosions needs to go up, the number of shots fired needs to go up, the volume of fighting needs to go up, in all senses, the amount and the actual sound of it. And you can do some of this, by the way, in the cheat menu, but it's too late to cover that now. What we need is the game to give the sense that we are in an apocalyptic infinity war at the end of time. And a lot of this can probably be delivered without actually changing the gameplay or balancing that much, only changing effects or splitting DPS over more sources. But my question is more about changing things, so my actual wishlist answer here is going to be, I want the terrain to be deformable. That's doable without changing anything else, I claim. I like the idea of our war's power being communicated by deforming the landscape. This means everything from having the ground be covered in holes, a la Company of Heroes, to actually having new routes open up, like rivers or sea flowing to new places as the land is deformed. And of course the ability to deform land deliberately, like make a wall of cliffs and stuff, could become possible there and indeed become a very unreasonable game mechanic. That's quite a project I've just suggested, but I strongly suspect the minds behind Beyond All Reason would like a juicy project, like having the sea actually flow to where the land allows it and have the land itself come and go by virtue of epic battles or land creating techno magic. Yes, for those who don't like me complaining about the game being too complicated, there's one for you. I've thrown you a bone. Here's a suggestion that makes it both programmatically and gameplay-wise way more complicated, with no mercy whatsoever, and somehow that feels like the right direction. Just make it even more unreasonable, try everything, experiment, learn, and from the huge mess that is Beyond All Reason, perhaps one day a future RTS giant will see what worked, see how Beyond All Reason actually innovated beyond the genre standard, and indicates a real future for a modern take on RTS. And they will achieve great and more reasonable things, thanks to their adventures in the heart of darkness that is Beyond All Reason. I'm beginning to embrace the madness and embrace optimism here, which means it's definitely time to stop. Bonus cool thing while I'm here though, I wanted a unit that transforms into a building that either heals or gives area control, kind of like that thing in Command & Conquer 3 that I forget the name of, and I'm not going to elaborate on that. Let's move right on, we need to end this. Thanks for listening to this huge commentary. The next one might be shorter, more reasonable and less nerdy, but I'm never really going to commit to that promise. I played Songs of Silence, a strategy game I'd never heard of, that impressed me immensely, but of course had me salivating at the prospect of complaining about this, that or the other thing, so we'll get to that next. Also, I actually want to play Supreme Commander 2. After all these years, I still haven't done it. I heard it's worse than 1 and got scared off because of that, but I should go and learn why the Total Commander-like RTS strand died off. I'm pretty sure the game lost all of its publisher's money, that's the boring answer, and scared everyone off because of that, scared anyone from making this kind of game anyway. I looked it up a while back and I remember seeing the original Supreme Commander also lost all of its publisher's money or just broke even or something, so it was a failure from a production standpoint, even if it was well reviewed and was liked within the genre. Turns out if you spend any money making an RTS game, you'll lose it, because not that many people actually like RTS games, and well, there you go, there's why RTS is like it is now. It might just be that Beyond All Reason has a few ideas to solve that situation, and of course it certainly has a few that will make it much worse. Like, comment and subscribe, amen, thanks for watching.